Thank you, sir. Good evening, students. Good evening for a new topic. The subject is same, but topic is different. We have covered introduction of GST, very detailed manner, and we have understood how to read GST, what are the various acts under the GST. We have understood the constitution provisions, very important provisions. So once the base is set, now it is time to get into the chapters or in the topics of GST which is relevant to us. So the first topic which is relevant is supply topic. Okay, supply is a very important concept under GST, very important base for us to get into GST. So we'll understand the GST supply provision in today's session. Okay. There are a news article on Sunday regarding center continuing cess on GST till 2026 to meet a shortfall in GST compensation given to states. Where is cess charged in GST? We have this compensation cess. We were discussing the other day that there are various sections, various laws, right? This I was about to tell that we know that cess is a compensation cess. We have discussed on this that there is a compensation cess apart from the normal taxes on special category of goods. Right, this compensation cess was there only for 5 years from the date of GST implementation. So 17 to 22 it was there. Now the government is extended it for 1 more year. So they've extended up till 2026. No, they've extended up to 1 year is what I've seen. Okay. Now we'll understand the get the chapter of supply. Why supply is important. To understand this, we'll understand the earlier regime, what was there. When central excise was there, there was list which is there under the powers is mentioned here. Yeah, the powers under excise law was there under entry number 84 of list 1 of 7th schedule. Okay, so all this were there under respective entry of the schedule of the constitution. Now under central excise, the entries are not relevant. This is only for your reference. But when was excise duty charged? What was the triggering event? So any tax to be charged, like income tax, we know it's very easy to recollect, right? Income tax is when you earn a profit or you earn any income, you earn any salary. On those aspects, you pay income tax. So similarly, each of the taxation will have a levy point. That levy point is called as the trigger point. Under excise duty, what was the levy? Taxable event is the levy. Now, that taxable event was manufacture of goods. So, whenever used to manufacture goods, then excise duty was leviable. Under customs duty, when is it levied? Taxable event is import and export of goods. So, as and when you clear it, as and when you clear the goods, it is called as importation. When it crosses the customs frontier of India, that is when it is called as import and customs duty is payable then. Okay. Now, when is service tax payable? Service tax, the taxable event is rendering of service. Now, how do you determine rendering of service? That provisions are there under the service tax law. But basically, you have to understand that service tax, the taxable event was rendering of service. Under sales tax, the taxable event is transfer of ownership of goods. Okay. So, हमने देखा कि पुराने एक्ट में when was the trigger point, कब चार्ज लगता है, कब respective एक्ट के ऊपर टैक्स लगता है. So if I do a manufacturing, then excise duty is applicable. If I don't do manufacturing, then excise duty is not applicable. तो कभी किसी ट्रेडर को आपने देखा excise duty चार्ज करते हुए? नहीं चार्ज करेगा क्योंकि वो मैन्युफैक्चर नहीं करता है. तो जब भी कोई व्यक्ति जब रजिस्टर्ड होता है और वो मैन्युफैक्चर करता है तब उसको एक्साइज ड्यूटी लगेगी. सिमिलरली अभी जीएसटी में क्या होता है? जीएसटी में ये जो लेवी ट्रिगर इवेंट है, द टैक्सेबल इवेंट है, द टैक्सेबल इवेंट इज सप्लाई. तो आप सप्लाई समझेंगे फिर उसका प्रोविजंस भी समझेंगे. ठीक है. Section 7, so we'll get into supply, like how taxable trigger has to occur, then the tax attracts. Similarly, under GST, the supply has to take place. Once supply takes place, then the trigger of GST starts off. Okay. Now, what is the definition of supply? Supply is given under definition. The definition generally we've seen clause section 2, subsection 1, 2, 3 is the section where the definitions are mentioned. But supply is a complete charge in itself. That's the reason the definition of supply is given in a separate section and not part of the section 2. Okay, so it's not a small section, it is a complete law, complete code in itself. That's the reason a separate section is being assigned to define what is supply. Okay, supply includes section 7. This is your verbatim reading, verbatim text of the section itself. Section 7 says supply includes. Firstly, it's an inclusive definition. So you have to understand what is a exhaustive definition and inclusive definition. Exhaustive definition starts like supply means. Matlab, whatever is mentioned under the section, only that is supply. That is an exhaustive definition. By saying that whatever is mentioned in this section and whatever I say in this section, that is a exhaustive definition. But when it's an inclusive definition, it is inclusive of other meaning also, what is generally understood and specifically what is mentioned in the section. So when they say supply includes, it means what you generally understand as supply, and it includes the following. So this is an inclusive definition. But within this inclusive definition also, there is no scope left for anything outside. So there is no scope left for anything to be outside the scope of supply, because this definition is not exhaustive, it's inclusive. But within the inclusive, they've covered everything under the what we understand as supply. So we'll start with supply includes. There are various subsections. Is it important to learn this? If you learn this, trust me, this will be helpful for your final as well as for any of your future work also, because this is the base of the GST. So remembering this section will be really helpful. Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services. Okay, so even though it is inclusive, they've said it includes everything. Whatever we understand, it includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal. Okay, all forms of supply of goods or services such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease, or disposal, made or agreed to be made. Okay, it could be made today. So when I can make a sale today, or I can agree to make it tomorrow, or I can agree to make it in the future. Okay, any of these 8 things which is made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Okay, first part is covering most of the elements of GST, most of the elements on which GST will get attracted. It includes all forms of supply, and they have defined specific 8 terms. What are the meaning of these 8 different terms? How is one different from another? We'll read through subsequently. But understand that supply includes all forms of supply, and it includes the specific 8 terms. And it is made or agreed to be made. 2 important terms which I have highlighted, which is very important. It should be made for a consideration. Consideration means it should be made for a price. Now, this price could be in money or non-money, but there should be a price agreed. It should be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of his business. It should be made in the course or furtherance of this business. 2 important things. It should not be free. So if I do any services for free, if I do a sale activity for free, then it is not a supply, because supply, first part says it should be a sale and it should be for a consideration. So if I'm doing anything without a consideration, then it's not a supply. Other example, other aspect, if I do even it for a consideration, but it is not in the course or furtherance of business, I am not into that business. Okay, like I am a chartered accountant, I am a professional, and I am not into the business of painting. Suppose मैंने ऐसे ही कभी कुछ पेंटिंग कर लिया छोटा मोटा और उसको बेच दिया, कंसिडरेशन तो है, लेकिन मेरा बिजनेस नहीं है पेंटिंग करने का, मैं पेंटिंग के बिजनेस में नहीं हूँ, then I can say it is not a supply because it is not in the course or furtherance of business. Okay, so it should be in the course or furtherance of business, and there should be a consideration for 7(1)(a) to attract. So first part to attract, 2 things are important. It should be for a consideration and it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Clear? Second part 7(1)(a). अब A था, B था, समझ में आ गया. AA क्या हो गया? AA का मतलब है ये एक अमेंडमेंट है, क्योंकि A और B था, अब उनको कुछ और डालना था, उन्होंने AA कर दिया because they felt there was an amendment required, so that's why they brought this amendment. The activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents or vice versa for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration. मतलब क्या हुआ? The activities or transactions जो करता है by a person other than an individual. Other than an individual, if some entity is doing it to its members or constituents. They wanted to cover these clubs and associations. Generally, clubs or associations में क्या होता है? A club collects money from its members, or if it's an association who are non-members, उनसे भी collect करते हैं. So basically, within a limited scope of work, within a limited circle, you have some people engaged. Like it's an association of persons. So you have a lot of people. So they are all called as constituents. So any amount collected by the association is also a kind of supply, is what they're trying to cover. Why this was important is there's a history for this. Always associations and clubs never used to pay GST. They were saying association is a group of members, right? Now members have formed it. Now members या तो फिर खुद individually ले या फिर club के through ले. How does it make difference? So we are all buying for ourselves and we are utilizing for ourselves. So there should not be any activity of service tax or supply. So even under service tax, this litigation was going on. कि clubs or associations service tax नहीं भरेंगे क्योंकि whatever services is rendered by the club, that is like we ourselves, it's like a family. One person has contributed to a club and they've given the club to provide some services. So there was a litigation going on saying that clubs will not pay service tax. Then the department said, no, clubs also has to pay service tax. So this case went up to High Court and Supreme Court. Supreme Court held that in a case of a club or association, service tax was not payable. So they have held under service tax that service tax is not payable. After that decision came, this was the famous decision of Calcutta Club. Okay, if you refer to Supreme Court's judgment, you'll feel that Calcutta Clubs is a very famous decision on this association, wherein they've said that on the clubs and other associations, service tax is not payable. But the same should not impact GST. That's the reason GST authorities and the constitution in the parliament has made an amendment and added this activity to be a supply service so that any litigation should not go on. So service tax में हार गए ना, तो इसमें GST में at least जीत जाए, ताकि ये नहीं बोले कि बाद में कि GST Act में ही नहीं ये था ये. So they have made this amendment in the GST law itself, wherein they've said that the activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members, मतलब association का या club का जो है, which it's providing to its members or constitutions, or members are providing to the association, vice versa, दोनों तरफ से. For cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration is also a supply. So they want to cover activities of an association collecting money from its members. उसके ऊपर भी service tax GST लगेगा is what they're trying to focus on. Okay, and this is amendment, so you could expect some weightage on this. Okay, so activities of an association or clubs to its members is also treated as a supply. Then import of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. In first part, what we did, two legs were important. It should be for a consideration and it should be in the course of furtherance of business. But in this B, 7(1)(b), it says it should, these activity, if it is for a consideration, whether or not in the course of business, even if it is not in the course of business, it is supply. What is that activity? Importation of services. So if you do any importation of services for a consideration, but even if it is not in the course or furtherance of business, it is still deemed as a supply itself. Because they specifically mentioned key, whether you have a consideration or no consideration, but if you are importing for a whether in the course of business or not in the course of business, but there is a consideration involved, then it is a import of service. Means what? If I import some services for my business, suppose मैंने LinkedIn का subscription लिया है. It's a service which has been provided. Now, if LinkedIn is situated in Ireland, and if I take any subscription, I pay for that, right? So that is called as importation of service. Importation of service मतलब मैं बाहर से ले रहा हूँ service और इंडिया में use कर रहा हूँ. So that is a importation of service. Now I have to pay some amount for that. So if I pay some amount and if I use it for my business, I have to pay GST under reverse charge mechanism. What is reverse charge mechanism? Understand this. When I do any supply of goods or supply of services, who will pay taxes? Who will collect taxes? I will charge in my invoice, right? I'm supplying it to you as a student. If I am supplying some goods to you, I will charge GST and you will pay me the GST. Ultimately, responsibility is for me as a supplier to pay to the government. But in case of reverse charge, what happens? I supply something to you. I will not collect taxes from you. You have to pay to the taxes directly to the government. That is a scenario of reverse charge mechanism, wherein the supplier will not charge the GST, the recipient will pay the GST. Now, importation of services under that, because when I import something, the supplier is sitting somewhere outside India. Now, the authorities cannot reach out to him, right? So that's the reason they levy taxes on the recipient. So when I import some services, I have to pay GST on that under reverse charge basis. That is when I'm registered. If I'm not registered, who will pay? Then they have to pay. Okay. So if I'm not a registered person, then they will pay. So importation of services for a consideration, whether or not in the course of business. So I gave you example when it is in the course of business. Now let's take an example when it is not in the course of or furtherance of business. When a supplier is providing some music, say Wink Music is in India. There is another music app. Not getting that name. Wherein a foreign music service provider, okay, he supplies some services to me. In India, I use it and I pay consideration because any subscription, if I take it, I have to pay subscription, but it is not in the course of furtherance of business. I use it for my personal leisure. So on that is GST payable? Yes, on that also GST is payable because I've said on importation of services, which is for a consideration, but not in the course of furtherance of business, on that also GST, it is also a supply and GST is payable on that. So these are all covered under the meaning of supply. Then the activities specified in Schedule 1, they have laid down one schedule, they have called it as Schedule 1, which is made or agreed to be made without a consideration. Now we've seen that first is there should be a consideration and there should be a business. Then they said on importation of services, you have consideration, fine, but if it is not in the course of furtherance of business, it is a supply. Now third, like they've said, go to Schedule 1. In this, we have given you this list of activities. Now it should be in the course of furtherance of business, but even if it is made without a consideration, still it is a supply. Okay, like they've said some example like sale or disposal of asset. So if I sell some asset, even if I don't get consideration, still you have to pay GST because it is mentioned in Schedule 1. But that should be in the course of furtherance of business. They have not mentioned that it should not be in the course of furtherance of business. Aisa nahi likha hai. So this should be in the course of furtherance of business. Clear with this first thing? Because other slide is just a simple side. This is the main important thing. What is supply? So some questions here. So now there are two taxable events for one transaction. As excise continues, therefore we must pay excise duty on manufacture, then GST on supply of goods. Ramchandra, no, excise duty is not there now. Excise duty is subsumed. So we saw in the last session that excise duty is there only on few products, right? Only on those products, both will apply. But on all other products, majority of the products, I would say 99% of the products, GST only is there, but this thing is not there. Excise duty is not there. Okay. What is the meaning of furtherance? When we read the definition of business, then we'll understand what is the meaning of furtherance. In the course or furtherance of business, what we are using, we'll understand that when we go to the definition of business. Consideration other than cash. Consideration other than cash could be what? When I am supplying something, when I am providing a chartered accountancy professional services and somebody is not giving me cash, he's giving me something in goods. Suppose I need to buy a laptop. I'm providing some services to a laptop vendor and he's providing me the laptop. So that is a consideration other than cash. So we're doing a barter transaction. That is an example of consideration other than cash. Barter and exchange is of same thing, sir. Then what's the difference between the two? We'll read all the 8 meanings. We'll get to know what is the difference between barter and exchange. Sir, if we have a building and I give it to a person on rent, then is it a supply? Yes, rental is covered. So rental is also a supply. Lease, rental, all covered under supply. As per the term, course or furtherance of business, business includes professional too. Yes, business includes professional too. If I have imported TeamViewer subscription service from Germany for employees in company, then company is liable to GST payment under RCM. Yes. So if I take any professional subscription from any company who is billing from Germany and I've used it for my business, then I have to pay GST under reverse charge basis. On the other things, songs are what I was saying, somebody has highlighted, yes, say Spotify. So when I import something, I pay subscription to Spotify, then I have to pay, then GST is attracted. Now, who will pay? We'll come to that, but GST is attracted because we are under supply. So it is a supply, even though if it is not in the course of furtherance of business also, still it is a supply because it is importation of service. Explain reverse charge again. I've explained reverse charge in detail again, saying that if I do any, generally the supplier pays the GST, but when some category of goods or some category of supplies are specified, the recipient pays GST. That is called as reverse charge basis. GST chargeable section. GST chargeable section is section 9. We'll understand that section 9 in the next section. Okay, good. So we understood this clearly. Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Then AA section is specifically on associations. Then 7(1)(b) is importation of services, which is for a consideration, which is whether or not in the course of furtherance of business. Then activity specified in Schedule 1, which should be in the course of furtherance of business, but it could be made without a consideration. Then 7(1)(a), where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection, they shall be treated either as a supply of goods or a supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. Again, 7(1)(a), there's an amendment. So this was already there under 7(1) itself. Then they excluded and brought it over here because they wanted to mention that Schedule 2 is a classification schedule. Now, where certain activities or transactions constitute a supply, once you have treated that it's a supply, now you may have to come to Schedule 2. They shall be treated either as supply of goods or a supply of services. So reference is given in Schedule 2 to certain category of activities, certain transactions, and then you can decide whether it is supply of goods or a supply of services. So Schedule 2 gives you a classification. So Schedule 2 is basically a classification schedule to classify whether it's goods or services. Why is that classification required? It is required because if it is supply of goods, you will go to the schedule for goods to find out the rate for that. And if it is a service, then you will go to the schedule of services to find the rate for the services. Like supply of food in a hotel. When you go to a restaurant, we get food. Is it goods or service? It becomes questionable. So they have clearly specified in Schedule 2 that supply of food in any form in a restaurant is a supply of service. So you will go to the service tax, service rate notification to see what is the rate on supply of food by the restaurant. Okay, so that's the relevance of this 7(1)(a). Then 7(2) says, notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, activities or transactions specified in Schedule 3 or such activities or transactions undertaken by the central government or state government or local authority in which they are engaged as public authorities as may be notified by the government shall be treated neither as a supply of goods nor a supply of services. So what are they saying? They're saying that notwithstanding whatever is mentioned in Schedule 1, in subsection 1, I will give you activities which is specified in Schedule 3 and some activities which is undertaken by central government or state government as public authorities. These services provided by the government as public authorities and services specified in Schedule 3. These two are treated neither as supply of goods nor supply of services. So these are outside the scope of GST itself. So some activities, what is there in Schedule 3 is not supply of goods nor it is supply of services. Okay. Subject, we'll get to understand what is Schedule 1, what is there in Schedule 2 and what is there in Schedule 3 in detail. I'll take you through the schedules as well. Subject to the provisions of subsection 1(1)(a)(2), the government may, on the recommendation of the council, specify by notification the transactions that are to be treated as supply of goods, not supply of services, supply of services, not supply of goods. Now at the end, what they're saying, the government has powers to determine what is supply of goods, but it is not a services, and what is supply of services, but not supply of goods. Like example of software. Now software, whether it's goods or services, was always a litigation under the earlier law. Now they will clarify saying that what is it, but they have not notified anything. But if the government has the power saying that if there is some confusion in the trade, then they can by notification specify what is supply of goods but not services, and what is supply of services but not goods. So that additional power is given to the authorities, saying that they can pass a notification for this. Okay. So basically what we covered now is what is supply. Supply means those 8 terms. Firstly, supply means supply of goods or services. Firstly, it should be for a consideration, right? It's supply of goods or services for a consideration and should be in the course or furtherance of business. Now, what was the exceptions we created? Exception first we said 7(1)(b), which is import of services. So everything should be in the course of furtherance of business, but import of services can be without in the course of furtherance of business, right? Then other exception was what? Other exception was for consideration. So then we said 7(1)(c) said that you go to Schedule 1. Here it should be supply of goods or services and it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Even if it is for without consideration, still it is taxable. That was Schedule 1, right? Then Schedule 2 was classification. Now Schedule 3 said that 7(2) transactions which is outside the scope of supply, which is Schedule 3. Okay, so Schedule 1 is exceptions for consideration, Schedule 2 is classification schedule, and Schedule 3 are those transactions which are outside the scope of supply itself, which is treated neither a supply of goods nor supply of services. Okay, let me take some questions here. Is all amendments covered for November 2022 exams? No. We had discussed this in the first class itself by Ms. Swati. She was saying that whatever circulars and notifications are issued up to April 2022. Okay, whatever notification circulars are appearing as per April 2022, that will be covered. So you will get a separate booklet on the Board of Studies, which will specify what are all the important amendments passed from the previous book till this book. Because the book, what you have, Board of Studies book, what is there in the website is for May 2022 exams. Now, any notifications and circulars or clarifications which issued after the publication of book up till April 2022 will be covered for your November 2022 exams. The manufacturer also has to pay GST. If yes, then why understanding GST yesterday through an example of module, manufacturer has not incurred input GST on raw materials? Ayush, your question is not clear. Could you please clear it? Without consideration means in kind payment. Yes. Without consideration means kind. No. Without cash means in kind. Without consideration means there is no consideration involved. So there is no supply at all. So there should be some consideration. Even in kind is also a consideration. So I agree that I will not collect money from you, but I will get something in return. So if I take the example of laptop, I have supplied him services and instead of him giving me money, he's given me something in return in kind. So that is also considered as a consideration. So consideration could be in cash or consideration could be in kind. So, sir, what is cess levied along with GST on sin goods? That is what we are discussing. This is a compensation cess. So on compensation cess is a cess which is levied on sin goods and on luxury goods. Okay. So it means that there should at least be consideration and business. Yes, for a general transaction, there should be two things. There should be a consideration and there should be in the course or furtherance of business. Reverse charge basis is when you buy services and goods outside the country. That's only one instance when you pay reverse charge. But other than that, when we get into charging section, you'll see there are so many other services on which reverse charge is applicable. One of those examples, one of those items is importation of services. So on importation of service, you say pay reverse charge. But apart from that, locally also, when you procure some services from some people, like if I take any lawyer services, if I obtain any services from a lawyer, even in that case, reverse charge is applicable. Services by government is not supply. No, services by government is also supply, except those services in which they are provided as a public authorities, like if they construct road and those things. When they are engaged for public services, then it is not a supply. Otherwise, all services by the government are taxable. Like government gives you a rental of your building Okay. In that case, is it providing service as a public authority? No, it is just doing as a commercial authority. So in that case, GST will be applicable. Of course, then you will have some exceptions, but at this level, at the threshold level, at the supply level, is it a supply? Yes, it is a supply. Services provided by government as a non-public authorities is a supply. So reverse charge basis is basically when we buy goods and services from outside the country, not necessary when we procure inside also reverse charge will come. So can the consideration be obtained through coercion? Now, consideration is when you agree voluntarily between two parties, right? We have seen this contract law. If you see, what is a consideration? When the supplier offers and the recipient agrees to pay, then it is a consideration. If you work it on coercive basis, it is not, because you have not agreed. It should be mutually agreed, voluntarily understood, voluntarily agreed and mutually understood, then it is a consideration. Okay. What will be the consideration value as if it is in kind and the person giving it costed him 1,000 and the market price is 2,000? Doesn't matter. So if I agree to sell a bottle of polish, now this bottle of polish MRP is 499 rupees. Now I agree to sell at 199 rupees. So for me, what is the consideration? For me, the consideration is what I agreed to pay, agreed to charge for my customer. So consideration is what I give a consideration for this product. So if I give consideration of 199, that is the consideration. Okay. So it is not a consideration what is mentioned. The market value is a consideration. There is a valuation rules under GST, which is not relevant for your portions at this level, but there is a valuation. But that valuation has to be done on when specific instances. When I don't take under consideration, when I don't go to related parties, when I sell supplies to related parties, then I have to go for market value, not otherwise. Okay. So if I sell a product which is in the market value is 2,000, but I sell for 1,000, still 1,000 rupees is the consideration. I have to pay GST on the 1,000 rupees. Clear? What do you mean by furtherance of business? Sunil Kumar will go to the definition of business. That time I'll tell you what is the meaning of furtherance of business. Okay. So you are clear with this? What is supply? What is schedules and things? Now we'll go to the important definition of few terms what we have used. Okay. Firstly, everywhere we have said it should be supply of goods or services. So what is goods or services we'll understand. Then consideration. What is consideration we'll understand. Then furtherance or course or furtherance of business. So what is business? That also we'll understand. First is goods. What is goods? Definition of goods is given under subsection 2. Under section 2. Section 2 says, what is meaning of goods? Goods means every kind of movable property. Goods means every kind of movable property, excluding money and security, but includes actionable claim, growing crops, grass and things attached to or forming part of the land, which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. Okay. One by one, we'll go again with this. Goods means what? Goods means every kind of movable property. Correct? So firstly, it should be a movable property. If it is immobile, it is not goods. Fine. Goods means every kind of movable property, but excludes money and securities. Okay. Money and security is excluded, but it includes actionable claim. So actionable claim means what? When I have a right to claim something. Suppose I've supplied some goods to one person and he said that he will pay me later on. So what is he? He's a debtor, right? So I've supplied goods to him. I've raised an invoice and he has to pay me. So I have an actionable claim against him to get that money back. That is actionable claim. Okay. So actionable claim and growing crops, grass and things attached to or forming part of the land. Right? Because these are all immobile property. Now, growing grass, growing crops, grass and things attached to forming or forming part of the land means it is attached to the land. So you will generally call it as immobile property, but read it completely. It says growing crops, grass and things attached to or forming part of the land, which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. So I've supplied, they have agreed that you can take whatever is the like the plants. If I have like tomato plants, tomato plant, you can take whatever is there in tomato before whatever is there in this 100 square feet area. Okay, so I've entered into a contract to sell the tomatoes. Either instead of me severing, I've told the person who is buying it to sever. So you cannot claim that no, it is immobile property. It is not goods. So it is goods because we have entered into a contract to sever the goods once we enter into a contract. So it is also goods. So goods means every kind of movable property. It excludes money and securities, but includes actionable claim and growing crops. Now, services. What is the meaning of services? Services means we know that anything is services, but they have defined that also. They're saying that services means anything other than goods, right? Like how we have the definition of movable property and immobile property. What is movable property? Means anything which is immobile property. And what is immobile property? Immobile property means anything other than movable property. No, that's not what it is defined. Immobile property is clearly defined. Okay, immobile property means anything which is attached to earth, okay, land, building, all of that is mentioned in the Immobile Properties Act, saying that what is immobile property, and mobile property means anything other than a immobile property. So services means anything other than the goods. Okay, whatever is goods is defined. Services means anything other than goods, but it excludes money and securities. So money and security is excluded from the definition of goods as well as from the definition of services. So services means anything other than goods, and it excludes money and securities, but it includes specifically few things. What does it include? Activities relating to use of money. Okay, money is excluded, but activities relating to use of money means what? If I give some money to somebody and I get something in return as interest, so it is for the use of that money. So that is included in the definition of services. Okay, then any activity I do for conversion of money. And second part, conversion of money by cash or by any other modes from one form, currency or denomination to another, for which a separate consideration is charged. Okay, so if I give like what they've said, conversion of money by cash. So if I give 500 rupees note and you give me 500 rupees, okay, 100, you give me 5. So that is a conversion of money by cash or by any other mode from one form, currency or denomination to another. So this is not change in currency. This is the same currency, you're giving a change. So this is not considered as a conversion of money. Conversion of money by cash or by any other mode from one form, currency, denomination to another, for which a separate consideration is charged. So even if I tell, okay, it is covered under denomination, 100 rupees note or 500 rupees note, you're giving me 500. So it's a change in denomination. Yes, that's a change in denomination, but for which you don't take a separate consideration. Say you take a separate consideration, then that separate consideration is also considered as service. Foreign currency translation. So if I give some dollars, I get something in INR, for which the exchange person charges me some consideration. That consideration is treated as a service on which GST is leviable. Okay, so anything for which you convert it and some additional consideration you levy, that is treated as services. Then use of money, we've seen the example is interest, or anything for which money is used is liable as service, and it is treated as a supply. Clear with definition of goods and services? Why are securities excluded both from goods and services? Money and securities both are excluded from services. Is it a kind of service, right? When you trade shares, you give money and you buy shares, right? It's like an investment. So it is not a goods nor a service, because it is not a goods. You cannot buy it. There's nothing called as a movable property. Is it a movable property or immovable property itself? Debatable. So securities, when you buy, it is not liable to GST, but security transaction tax you have when you buy a security, then the broker charges the brokerage fees. All of that is liable to GST, but securities per se is not liable. Okay, GST is not levied on share trading. Yes, GST is not levied on share trading on the value of shares, because you're buying shares and selling shares. It is not goods and not services. So securities per se is not goods or services, but the activities, the conversion charges, the brokerage charges, on all that, the brokerage fees, whatever the agent collects, on that GST is levied. Are shares and bonds excluded? Shares and bonds. The definition of security is so huge. It includes shares, securities, or bonds for which there is a value based on the underlying asset. Like when I buy a share, share, the share is based on the value of the asset, right? Value of the asset, which is the value of the company, right? So that's why it is a security. So all securities are excluded. They are excluded from the definition of goods and services. What is actionable claim? We have given that example. Is agriculturing taxable under GST? It is covered under supply because supply includes all goods, and vegetables or agriculture products are also goods. But there is an exception given to them, saying that there is the rate of GST is 0%. There's an exemption given. When the exemption is given, does it mean it's outside GST? No, it is there under the GST. It is falling under the definition of goods and services, but it is excluded by way of an exemption notification. Okay. Its definition as read in sale of goods and in foundation. Correct. All the negotiable instruments are actionable claims. Yes, negotiable instruments are also actionable claims. Considerations charged for converting currency to Bitcoin. Yes, that is also treated as a supply. On that also GST is leviable. Please explain definition of actionable claim as given in page 2.5 in study material. Actionable claims. Yes, actionable claims is defined as well. Actionable claim means a claim to any debt other than a debt secured by mortgage of immovable property or by hypothecation or pledge of movable property or by any beneficial interest in movable property not in possession, either actual or construction of the claimant, which the civil courts recognize. Okay, so basically what they're saying, it's a claim to any debt. So if I have to get something, okay, that's an actionable claim. So lottery ticket. Oh, one example is lottery ticket. When I buy a lottery ticket, I have the right to get participated in the draw. After the draw is announced and I'm the lucky winner. So that is an actionable claim. I have a right to claim that amount from the lottery person. So that is an actionable claim. So actionable claim is a claim to any debt. So like debtors, what I said, lottery tickets, they are all examples of the first point. Actionable claim means a claim to any debt other than a debt secured by a mortgage of immovable property. So if I give a immovable property for a mortgage and I get some money, that is not treated as an actionable claim. You cannot tell that I have given my property and I've got that money, so that property belongs to me. Still it belongs to me. No. There is a separate thing called as pledge for it, so it is not an actionable claim. Or by hypothecation or pledge of movable property. Hypothecation and pledge of movable property also is not an actionable claim. Okay, so it's a contract wherein we have agreed that I will give you my goods, I will give you my machinery, you give me some money. Okay, so I cannot tell that that still belongs to me. I have a right of that on actionable claim. No, pledge, borrowings, all of this is outside the definition of actionable claims. Pledge of movable property or to any beneficial interest in a movable property not in possession. Okay, any interest I have in a property is also not an actionable claim. Suppose I have a right to collect rent from a property. Rent is not an actionable claim. Rent is a service separately, so that will be treated as a service, but it cannot be treated as an actionable claim. Either actual or constructive of the claimant, which the civil courts recognize as affording grounds for relief, wherein these grounds are considered as a relief, only that are treated as excluded from actionable claim. Whether such debt or beneficial interest be existent, accruing, conditional, or contingent under the Transfer of Property Act. So, wherein anything of a Transfer of Property Act is there, which is related to an immobile property, is excluded. All things which is related to movable property and for which I have a right to claim any debt is an actionable claim. Clear, Lavanya? Consideration charge for converting to Bitcoin. I've explained this. Please explain definition of actionable claims as given in 2.5. Karthik, I think, are you clear now? Use of money as a consideration, right? No, use of money for a consideration, not as a consideration. Use of money for a consideration, then it is included. The definition here says money is excluded, but use of money for a consideration, yes, use of money for a consideration is included. Anything for a consideration, only then it is included. Use of money is supplied from whom? Owner or user of money? Whoever pays the money is the service recipient. Now, I am giving you a foreign exchange. I'm using your money and I'm giving you, say, giving you dollars, for which I'm charging you some for conversion charges. So I am the supplier. So then I'm the person who will be called as a supplier and you are the receiver. Use of money. Now, if I am giving you a loan and you are giving me an interest, I am getting the interest, right? So I am the supplier of services of giving you the money to use. So I am the supplier. So you have to look at from the point of view of supplier, which means the person who is given that loan. Okay. So is nil rated and exempt same? Nil rated and exempt are not same. Nil rated and exempt, we'll see, come to the definition. Exemption means where there is an exemption. Okay, there is a notification which says that these services are exempted, that is exemption. But in the rate notification, if the rate is zero, that is considered as a zero rated or nil rated. Okay, so nil rated means where the rate is nil, and exempt means those goods or services which are exempted. Goods is contravening what we learned in foundation. No, this is the same definition what we have learned in foundation. Actionable claim basically means, but this definition is there under GST law. What definition you had under the foundation will be under the contract law. The definition under the contract law will be different. The definition under GST law will be different. Actionable claim basically means any unsecured debt, right? One of the examples of actionable claim is unsecured debt. But apart from that, lottery tickets, other things are also actionable claims. Sir, can debtors be called as actionable claim? The right to debt is an actionable claim. Debtors are not called as actionable claims. The right to get that money is called as actionable claim. When you get to Schedule 3, you'll understand more clearly actionable claim, because they've said actionable claim are outside the scope of GST. Schedule 3, wherein it is treated as no supply, no goods, is there under that, because they didn't want to charge GST on every actionable claim. Actionable claim other than lottery, betting, and gambling. So on lottery is an actionable claim, betting is an actionable claim, gambling is an actionable claim, and collection of debts is also actionable claim. But they've said only these three. Apart from these three things, all other actionable claims are there as no supply of goods nor no supply of services. Okay, so actionable claim is there under Schedule 3. So you don't have to worry that on all the actionable claims GST is there. No, on all actionable claims GST is not there. On only three kinds of actionable claims, that is lottery, betting, gambling, and lottery tickets. Only on these three things GST is there. All other actionable claims are excluded from the definition of supply itself. What is meant by hypothecation? Hypothecation is similar to pledge. In terms of goods, what we have is in case of movable property, we have mortgage in case of immobile property, right? So similarly for movable goods, you have hypothecation, wherein you give goods to somebody and they like it generally happens in terms of two-wheeler finance. So when I give my two-wheeler documents, I hypothecate it to the issuing the finance company. It means they have a right on my vehicle if I don't pay their debts on time. So that is called as hypothecation. Fixed deposit is also an actionable claim. Yes, but fixed deposit, you have a right to get back that money. That is also an actionable claim. Clear. So very good. Guys are really interested in understanding the legal terms, legal definitions. That is really interesting. Okay. Now we'll go to the meaning of supply. We said that supply includes 8 terms. Sale. First is sale. What is sale? Sale means transfer of ownership of the title to property from one person to another person for a price. So if I agree to give something to you, that is sale. Now I can give it to you or I can agree to give it to you. Both of it is a sale, wherein I will agree for a transfer of ownership. Basically, there should be a transfer of ownership of the title to property from one person to another person. Means what? If I give a software, like Tally's example, or any software which I develop, and I give you a right to use it. Okay, that is not a sale, because I am not giving you everything. I'm not giving you title to property. Title to property means what? If I give it to you, you can use it however you want. So if I sell you a pen, either you can break it, or you can remove the refill, or you can resell it, or you can write it. So that is transfer of property. Means I've given you the ownership and the property in the goods. That is treated as sale. It is a contract where the seller agrees transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a price. So that is the definition of the Sale of Goods Act. Sale of laptops by a dealer to customer is a sale, right? So I have to transfer the ownership and the property. Just ownership, no property, no. Ownership and property both has to be transferred. That is the meaning of sale. Clear? Next, I think that example of pen, you will remember that I have to transfer it completely. So that I shouldn't guide you what you should do. You can break it. You can do anything with it. That is example of sale. Second is transfer, to convey or remove from one place to another. Okay, no mention of consideration. To convey or remove from one place to another. Example, transfer from warehouse to showroom. Right? When I'm transferring the goods without any consideration or for consideration, whatever, it is a transfer, right? So if I'm a head office, I'm giving some goods to my branch office. That's an example of transfer. Okay. The definition of transfer, what is there in the income tax is very different. This transfer meaning is a general meaning of transfer. Now, there could be a consideration or no consideration, but when I'm transferring the goods, that is the meaning of transfer. Then barter. Barter means exchange of goods or services for other goods or services instead of using money, right? We know this, that when I give something, the other person gives me something in return for a same value, or at least I don't know whether we have to go to valuation, but I agree that this is good for me. Now, when the valuation, whether it is same value or everything, I will not touch when I do a barter transaction. When I do a barter transaction, I agree that, okay, whatever you are giving, I'm accepting. It could be less, then I'll ask him more. But when I've agreed that, okay, you give me this thing in return and I'll give you this, this is a barter transaction. Okay. If there is a barter transaction, then I don't have to do much about it. No valuation is required because I've agreed it. Now, in barter transaction also is a supply, which means that if, take this example of a CA consultancy service for medical services by a doctor. So if I provide him consultancy services and he provides me doctor services, both are treated as supply transactions. So on my supply, I have to charge GST, and doctor being exempt, he will not charge. But both of them are a supply transaction. Two individual supply transactions are there in a barter transaction. Now, what is the difference between barter and exchange? Exchange is an act of giving or taking one thing for another, but there is something more involved. Okay. So if I agree to sell my old vehicle, okay, and I have to pay, I'll get a new vehicle, but it will not be for same value. If it is same value, it's barter. But if I sell old vehicle and he gives me new vehicle, then he says me some differential also I have to pay, is an example of exchange. So barter is no consideration involved. When there is some consideration involved, it's an example of exchange. License. The permission is granted by the competent authority to engage in a business or occupier or in an activity which is otherwise unlawful. Okay. So if I'm giving a permission which I should not give, but because of this licensing agreement or licensing contract, it has become lawful. Okay. Like a software vendor, like a Microsoft. Now, Microsoft produces this MS Word, or it has this Microsoft Office package. Okay. Now this, if it gives to somebody, it becomes unlawful, but it has a licensing agreement, right, to give it on license. So it becomes a lawful activity. That is an example of license. Okay. Permission to enter and use the property is allowed, is a license. So we use generally, when we enter into a rental agreement, we have a lease and license agreement, which means I'm giving you a lease and I'm giving you permission to enter my property. So I'm giving you permission to use, which is otherwise unlawful, is treated as license. Okay. Disposal. We know disposal, just throwing off, giving off. Sale, pledge, giving away, use or consumption or any disposition of a thing is disposal. Disposal is sale or transfer, but property does not possess merchandisable warranty, which means if I sell something today and if it gets broken or something, or if it's not performing at the time when I agreed it, okay, I said that it will perform, it will give you good quality is separate thing, but at least basic things it should perform. So if I give you a product and if it's not performing, you have a right to claim it back. That is an example of a sale. But just one moment. No, no issues, sir. Sure. Okay. So we are discussing what is a disposal, wherein I pledge or give away something, okay, for which there is no guarantee. Like when I sell off my old laptop now, and I'm just disposing it off. Whether consideration, not consideration, I've disposed it off. Now other person cannot come back to me saying that it's not working because I've just disposed it off. Had it been a sale transaction, he had a right. The disposal are generally for no consideration, right? So when I give off something, I give off something to a charity, I give something to a NGO, okay, then it does not possess a merchantable warranty. He cannot come and say me this is not working and things. That is an example of disposal. So sale is when I give it off and I have a consideration and the other person has a right to claim it as a sale. But when I dispose it off without consideration and the other person cannot ask me on the terms of the product is an example of disposal. But disposal also is under supply because we have seen under Schedule 1, disposal without consideration also is included there. Okay. Then rental, agreement to rent something. So it could be renting of a property or renting of a thing is example of a rental. Lease means it's actually rental for an immovable property. Okay. For an immovable property. Lease is where possession is transferred along with the right to use property. Okay. Lease, to make a lease agreement by which money is paid in order to use land, building, or a vehicle or a piece of equipment for an agreed period of time. Okay. So that's an example of lease. Generally, lease is used in terms of immovable property. Lease is where possession is transferred along with the right to use property. Right. I give a property and I tell him to use it. That's an example of a lease agreement. Okay. License is similar to lease except that possession is not transferred. Right. Like in a license, I have the right and I don't give him completely. Possession is not transferred. Only useful of other benefits is transferred. That's an example of license. That's the difference between license and lease. In lease, like I have a property, I have a house, I give it to him. So he can use it and he has a possession of that. That's an example of lease. But in license, say a software license, he doesn't have a right to take possession of my property. Like I have the know-how. I'm only giving him the license to use. Okay, he cannot come and he cannot sell my license. He can only use my license. That's an example of license wherein limited usage is given. But in case of a lease, a right to possess the property is also given. Okay. As per classification in Schedule 2, license, lease, and rental of goods with or without transfer of right to use are covered under supply of service. So all license, lease, and rental, all of this are covered under supply of service under the classification of schedule. Okay, some questions here. Consideration, charge, okay, use of money. What is the example in which government is engaged as public authorities when the government does services and provides services to us, say construction of road or collection of garbage? All of those are examples of when government is engaged as public authorities. So next question is, so as per service definition, if I, for example, lend money to someone and charge interest, then I am liable to pay GST, or is it that I must be doing business of lending money, then only I am chargeable to GST? Okay. So lending money on which you collect interest is business, because if you're doing this regularly, then it becomes a business. But there is an exemption to that also, saying that if you're collecting any interest on your lending business, then that is exempted. Okay, so it is actually taxable, but because of this exemption, it is exempted. But if you do one-time basis, had that exemption not been there, then what would be the stand? If I'm into that business, then it is leviable to GST. Otherwise, it is not leviable to GST if I do it one time. But for both, whether it is the person who's doing it is into the business of this or no, there is a exemption for the interest portion. Okay. It could be banks or it could be personal finance companies. On everybody, there is no GST on interest. When we buy anything on EMI, is it hypothecation? when we buy something on EMI, that is also an example of hypothecation. Yes, it is an hypothecation of the laptop. So how can debtors be not actionable claim? Because we have a right to claim debt due from them, right? Yeah. So debtors are actionable claims. I never said it is not actionable claims. Debtors are actionable claims only. But under GST, they're all excluded from the definition of goods, is what I'm saying. Because Schedule 3 specifically said only 3 kinds of things will be actionable claims. Others will not be treated as actionable claims for GST, but debtors are actionable claims. What is the difference between rentals and license? I've explained. Rental basically is used for movable property, and lease is used for immovable property. Interest on FD is chargeable to GST. Interest on FD, no. Any interest excluded. So any interest, the government has given an exemption saying that any interest charge is outside is not chargeable to GST. There's an exemption. So if rental income is charged under income tax, will it again get charged under GST? Yes, it will still be charged under GST. So one thing you have to clearly understand is whatever is there under the income tax, it's on the income portion. But here it is not on the income portion, it is on the transaction. So if I collect rent, on that I will charge GST, right? That GST will be paid by my tenant that I will deposit to the government. On this rental income, I have to pay income tax. Yes, that's so. There's no two levy. There are two things on the same transaction. One is income tax on the income, one is GST on the transaction. Clear? If food license also covered in the license definition, food license could be like what? So you're having the license to give food. There's nothing like food license. Just please explain what you mean by food license. But we receive rent on lease property. We call it as rent on lease property, but it's actually the legal term is lease itself. So on any property, what you receive is lease. On rental is generally on a movable property transaction. Rent charge for house by house owner is immovable and rental also. Yes, rent charge by house by lease or rental is used for tangible assets, while license is mostly used for intangible assets. Lease is the term which is used for intangible assets. Yeah, intangible assets you call it as license, and lease you call it for tangible goods. Correct. Paying rent for fat, whether it is lease or rental, legally it is immovable property, so it is lease only. Okay, now let's get into some examples. Mr. A, to understand this supply and things, Mr. A buys a table for 10,000 rupees for his personal use. He's bought it for his personal use, that he will use a table. Now he sells it off after 10 months of use to a dealer. Now this is considered a supply or no? This is not considered as a supply because he's not a furniture dealer that is buying and selling. He's just bought it, he used it and he sold it because his usage got over. This is not considered as a supply under GST, as this is not done by Mr. A for the furtherance of business. He's not into the regular habit of buying and selling, so it is not his business, not a supply. Mrs. B provides free coaching to neighborhood students as a hobby. Now, is this considered as supply? Whether she's doing it as a hobby or no, it will be treated as a supply. But the catch here is she's doing it for free. Okay, so there is no consideration involved, since this is not considered as supply, as this is not performed for a consideration. So if she charges something, then she's into regular business of this, then it will be treated as a supply itself. When a new mobile worth 10,000 is purchased in exchange for an old mobile, along with the monetary consideration of 2,000 paid for the said purchase, this is an example of exchange. You can't call this as a barter. Barter means when I exchange something and get something and there is nothing more involved is a barter. Exchange means something which I exchange something for. Okay, that is an example of exchange. Where a laptop is supplied for rupees 30,000 along with a barter for printer which is manufactured by the recipient is an example of barter, wherein I don't give anything else. This is an example of barter. Katrina Kaif uses the services of makeup artist from USA. Okay, and GST is liable. Now she is using it for her business because she's into it, and there is a consideration involved, right? So it is liable to GST under reverse charge basis on such service. So she will have to pay, Katrina Kaif, if she is registered under GST, then she will have to pay GST on reverse charge basis. We'll understand reverse charge further in the next session on charge, but just understand that reverse charge is applicable on import of services. Okay, now let's understand the definition of consideration. Consideration means payment. Now, this payment does not mean money. Consideration generally means what? Consideration means always within money, money, money. No. Consideration doesn't mean money. Consideration means payment. This payment does not mean money only. It can be non-monetary terms also. When it is monetary terms, cash, check, credit card, these are all monetary terms. When it is non-monetary terms, still it is consideration, because instead of paying money, I can pay something else, right? That is also treated as a consideration. Now, if I'm supplying, say, a laptop, and you pay me in money, that is a monetary consideration. Now, if I supply laptop and you don't give me money, you give me something else for which I've agreed at. Okay, that is an example of non-monetary terms. What could it be? When I'm supplying you a laptop, you could tell that you will sell me some furnitures. Okay, or you could say that, take a bigger example. When I construct a building, okay, I construct a building and the builder says that I will give you cement. You don't purchase the cement for the building. I will ensure that I will maintain the quality and I'll give you the good quality cement. So that cement, what is being supplied, instead of me buying, he's giving it to me, is an example of the consideration, because I had to sell him and he will pay me 1 crore rupees. From 1 crore rupees, he said, I'll pay only 90 lakh rupees, 10 lakhs worth of goods of cement I will give you. So this 10 lakh also is a consideration. So that is the relevance of consideration from a macro perspective, saying that not only on individual supply, on a bigger supplies, if the supplier is giving goods, if the receiver is giving goods to the supplier, which supplier had to pay, that is to be treated as a consideration still. Consideration can also be non-monetary. That's what it could be, either in money or in kind. Money value of any act or forbearance. Forbearance means what? If I pay you, or if I agree that I will give you, or if I agree I will not give you, and you want that, saying that forbearance means not doing anything. So if an employee leaves the organization and he says that he will sign a contract and he will not join any company in which the same business is done. So that's an act of forbearance, for which if I pay him consideration, that is also a consideration. Okay. Consideration need not always flow from recipient. It can be by a third party. I sell goods to you. Now you are the receiver. Now consideration can be paid by you, or it could be paid by any other person, right? So if I sell goods to you, you pay something to me in return. You could pay me the money, or somebody else on your behalf pays the money. Still, it is treated as a consideration. Okay. However, what is excluded from the definition of consideration is subsidy given by central government or state government is not considered as a supply. So any consideration given by the central government and state government, local authorities, municipal authorities, they are all not covered. It should be supplied by the central government or state government. Only then it is a consideration. Only then it is an exclusion from consideration. Subsidy given by Melinda Gates Foundation. So it's a big foundation. If they are giving you consideration, is it liable to GST? Yes, it is still liable to GST, because they are not central government or state government. A deposit given in respect of supply of goods or services shall not be considered as a payment unless the supplier applies such deposit as consideration. Now I give a deposit. What is deposit? Deposit is that I give you some security kind of a thing, wherein after a contract gets over, you have to return back to me. So is that deposit considered as a consideration? No, because I'm not using the deposit for, that's a fixed, it's like a deposit with me. Like how you have a fixed deposit, like that I take a deposit from you. So deposit is not a consideration unless the supplier uses the deposit to offset against the sales what he's made. So if he offsets that to that extent, it is a consideration. So if he's not using it, then it's still a deposit, not a consideration. Consideration, importantly, has to be a quid pro quo, which means I should get something in return. Okay, or you should get something for something is a quid pro quo transaction, wherein I give you something and get back something to you from you back is a consideration. Consideration has to be a quid pro quo. Very important, because we'll understand this, that there are various circulars which has been given wherein they've said if there is a quid pro quo, then it is a consideration, not otherwise. Okay, let's take these examples. Donations. When I give something, when I donate something to a NGO, is it a consideration? Generally, they are one-sided, wherein I give donation, I don't expect something in the return. Like an NGO, when I give a donation, I've just given it as a donation, nothing in return, nothing. It is not a, it is not falling, it is not liable to GST because there's nothing in return, right? So it's not a consideration. However, if there exists a quid pro quo, that is an obligation on the part of the recipient of the donation to do something, then it's a supply. So when I give a donation with the expectation saying that I give an agreement saying that I'll give you this donation, you have to publicize my name. You have to use my name everywhere. Okay, like there were some donations which are given. That's why the circular came saying that they're being given donations with mentioning of a name everywhere. So it becomes a marketing services, right? You're expecting something in return. You're getting a quid pro quo for the donation. Then it will be treated as a supply transaction. So in that case, what happens? The person who is receiving the donation, he's a receiver, right? But who is supplying? I'm giving the money and he is giving something to me. So he will have to get registered and pay GST on it. Okay, because the person who's paying the money is generally the recipient. I am giving money to him. So I am a recipient. So who is a supplier? The NGO. Okay, NGO becomes a supplier. They will have to register under GST and pay it. So be very careful. If there's any donation on which there's a quid pro quo, then who pays the GST on that? The supplier pays it. The supplier in this case becomes the NGO. However, the circular further clarifies that if the name of the donor is displayed as an expression of gratitude and public recognition of donors' philanthropy and is not aimed to giving publicity to the donor, then there is no supply or service for a consideration. So just they put the name donated by at a small place or gifted by so and so person, and they're not doing any publicity. They're just giving a small token of appreciation to the person who's given it. Then it will not be treated as quid pro quo, because basic things they will do, if they're doing something exorbitant things like they have to oblige to do something, then there's a quid pro quo, not otherwise. Another example of quid pro quo and example for consideration is artworks. When the artworks are exhibited at galleries or exhibition, and so I'm an artist. An artist gives his artworks to sell, display at an exhibition, and he gets nothing. So there is no supply. So if he gives something and he gets something in return, then there is a quid pro quo. Then he gives it. But he just gives his artworks to an artist, to an exhibition holder, and an exhibition holder displays it at the exhibition. Then there is nothing involved in it. So it's just a there's no consideration involved, no supply, no GST. So when somebody buys at that exhibition, okay, then there is a supply, and then GST is payable. So just display is not a supply, no GST is leviable. Then barter, no consideration, how to calculate charge in it. In barter, there's no consideration, but then the valuation rules will tell that when there is no consideration, then you have to go to the valuation rules. Valuation rules says what is the open book value, which means what is the value of this product had you sold it in the open market. That will be the consideration, that will be the value on which you will pay GST. FSSAI food license, is it covered under license definition? No, that's a right to use food. The FSSAI license is a license on which GST is not payable because it's a service provided by the government as a public authority. So they have to regulate you, and that's the reason they're providing this food license. On that, GST is not payable. Is donation also part of the consideration? As I explained, if donation is for a quid pro quo, then it's a part of the definition. Forbearance, I have a right, I am forbearing, I am bearing you, is a forbearance. The meaning of forbearance means when I agree to not enter into a contract with anybody, like you have this non-compete clause under contract saying that if you are if you're supplying goods to me, you cannot supply goods to anybody. That, and for which I will give you consideration. So that's a meaning of forbearance. Can you explain subsidy with more example? Yes. Subsidy means when I have to supply some goods. Suppose I have to supply goods to a school, I will charge GST, right? Now, if I supply something and the government sees that the price the schools cannot afford, government will give me subsidy saying that instead of 20 rupees, you charge only 15 rupees, 5 rupees we will give you. So for me, what I will charge at 15 rupees, 5 rupees is coming from the government. So that 5 rupees is my product pricing, which I would have otherwise paid GST on 20 rupees, right? So on 20 rupees, I would have paid GST, but I'm paying GST on 15 rupees because this 5 rupees is coming from central government or state government. Then I don't have to pay GST. But this 5 rupees is coming from any private authorities. Then this will be added to my consideration and I have to pay GST on the whole 20 rupees itself, right? If Tata Group donates money to a temple and asks not to mention its name, it is not supply. Yes. But if it expects some from temple to put a play card mentioning donated by, then GST, no. Just a play card, if it is provided, then it's not. But if they're doing publicity or doing marketing of it, they're doing a lot of things for Tata, saying that they're publishing, marketing a lot of Tata products and things, then it is supply, not otherwise. If artist pays rent for place of exhibition, then it's supply. Yes. If artist pays rent, those things are liable to supply. But if there is nothing moving, if just that artist work is being displayed as an exhibition, then on that artist, whatever is painted, GST is not applicable. That is what the circular is clarifying. So if both payer parties, that is buyer and seller, not registered under GST, still GST is not payable? Yes. There are some supplies under reverse charge, where when we see if receiver is not registered and if receiving some services, then he has to pay GST. But generally, if supplier and receiver is doing any sale or purchase transaction and which is not covered under RCM notification, then it will not be liable to GST. What is quid pro quo in case of donations? When I give you a donation, I expect that you will do marketing for me. You'll do a lot of popularities, things for me, saying that, okay, they have donated, and you will do marketing services. You will, wherever you go in your diary, you'll mention my name. So those are the things which is I'm expecting from you. So that's the example of a quid pro quo. Okay, we'll take a break for 5 minutes, not more than that, maximum by 7. Before 7:25, we'll assemble. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. After the break, we'll continue now on definition of business, and we'll proceed further. So we've understood, and I think I've seen all the answers. Questions have been answered. What is quid pro quo in case of donations and things? Great. So let's move ahead. Definition of business. Business, and it should be in the course of business. Okay. So basically, business itself covers everything. In the course of business, a lot of questions will be, what is in the course of business? Anything done before starting the business or any incidental activities done is in the course of furtherance of business. In the furtherance of business means to expand your business or to further grow your business, right? Like I am a chartered accountant. I am providing audit services. Now, main activity is audit services. Now, to provide audit, I may have to travel outside the state and stay in a restaurant, stay in a hotel. Now, for that, I am incurring some expenses for which reimbursements I will bill. So, is my reimbursement main business? No. For doing the main business of the audit services, I have to incur additional expenses for which I will bill the client. Those reimbursements becomes in the course or furtherance of business. In the course of business or for my furtherance of business, I'm doing that. Then any marketing services which I am doing is for the furtherance of business. So those are all covered under the definition of business. Okay. Now, what does definition of business say? Business includes trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, etc. So it includes everything: trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation. Okay, so it includes all of that. Yes, profession is also include, manufacturing is include, any kind of trading activities, any kind of commercial transactions, any kind of vocation, wherein it could be that vocation. I could give an example that doctors are professions, but you have nurses. They're not professionals, but they are under the vocation, wherein they have special skills, or could be a physiotherapist. They are all covered under the definition of vocation. So if they are not professionals, they are not into trade, but they are making their living through additional services. They are all considered as doing the business. They are under business. They are under the term of vocation. So that is also defined under definition of business. Then these people could be the activities, incidental or ancillary activities are also covered. Incidental or ancillary activities. Suppose I'm installing a air conditioner. I'm into the business of air conditioner. Then additional installation services. They are all incidental and ancillary services. They are also covered under the definition of business itself. Whether or not there is a volume, frequency, continuity, or regularity. So this is a little confusing thing, because sometimes in my example, I said I bought a table and I sold it off. I'm not into the business of buying and selling of table. So it is not treated as supply. But here see, it is completely misleading. Here it says whether or not there is a volume, frequency, continuity, or regularity. Still it is a business. So if I do one-time activity also, will you call it as business? It can be called as business, but I should be somewhere into it, right? If I'm a chartered accountant, I'm selling my furniture. The furniture was used for my business, so I'm selling it. So then it is treated as business. But a person who is using the furniture for his residence and he's selling, that cannot be considered as a business. So we have to read this, whether or not there's a volume, frequency, continuity, or regularity in the light of other terms. That is, if a business person is selling it, then you say, okay, he has used it for his business, now he's selling it, then it will be treated as a business. But a person who's using it for his residential purpose and is selling it, then I think calling it as a business becomes very difficult. So it depends on each facts and circumstances. Whether he's using something for his business and selling, then it's fine. You can call it as a business, even though there is no volume or frequency. But if he's using it for his residential purposes, then should not be fall under this. Supply or acquisition of goods, including capital goods or services. So supply or acquisition of goods is also treated as business, which means if I am acquiring goods, including capital goods and services, cannot say that assets, I'm not into a business of dealing into a furniture, so it is not a business, but you are using that furniture for your business, right? So that is also covered under business. Why is it important? Because input tax credit on any activities of business is covered. So any capital goods when you purchase, on that also input tax credit can be claimed. Provision of facilitating to members of a club or association. We had read, no, 7AA, 71AA, wherein clubs were also treated as supply. So that is also covered under the definition of business. So they shouldn't argue saying that it is not under the definition of business, but it is there under the definition of supply. It is there under the definition of business as well as under the definition of supply. Provision of facilities to members of a club or association. Admission of persons to any premises means what? Admitting a person to any premises, entry charges, entry fees, what you collect, that is, are the people who are doing that entry activity, they are also under the business. So they cannot say, no, we are not doing anything, we are just allowing people inside. Exhibition is held, you're collecting entry charges, you're admitting persons to that premises, you are a business, you are providing business. Services supplied by a person as a holder of an office means what? If a person is providing service as a holder of a special office or any office. Office means what? Like a director. A director is providing services on his capacity of being a director. So services supplied by a person as a holder of an office, that is also business. Everything is covered basically. Everything, whatever could be left out, all the terms have been included under the definition of business. Services by a race club is also covered under business. Activities undertaken by the central government, state government, or any local authority is also covered under definition of business. By that 7B, there is exclusion when they are provided as a public authorities, but they are also under the business. They are covered under the definition of business, but because of the specific mention under 7B, 7.2, that is excluded, but otherwise it is all covered under the definition of business. Okay. Now some more clarification on this. Ramesh sold a car which he was using for his personal use. He had not brought it as a business use. So it is not a supplies since it is not made in the course of furtherance of business. Mahima sold her gold ornaments to a jewelry shop. This is also not a supply since it is not made in the course of furtherance of business. SRK. What is SRK? Shah Rukh Khan paints some painting and he sells them. However, the consideration is donated to a charity. Now, if I do any painting, nobody will buy. But if our SRK does any painting, even if you don't understand it, people will buy. Correct है ना? जो भी है, अगर कोई celebrity बेचेगा, बना के बेचेगा, तो उसके लिए उसको consideration मिलेगा. So sale of painting will qualify as a supply. तो वही distinction है, because इसमें हमने पढ़ा था यहाँ पे कि whether there is no volume, frequency or continuity or regularity, लेकिन अगर जब सुपरस्टार बनाएगा उसकी पॉपुलैरिटी बढ़ेगी और उस पेंटिंग की वैल्यू भी बढ़ जाएगी, उसको ऑक्शन में भी लेने के लिए लोग तैयार रहेंगे, तो उस केस में उसको सप्लाई माना जाएगा. और बिकॉज वो वोकेशन के डेफिनेशन में आ जाता है कि वो कभी कभी करता है, वोकेशन में आ जाता है, लेकिन जब मैं करूंगा तो कोई नहीं खरीदेगा बिकॉज देयर इज नो पॉपुलैरिटी एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. तो मेरे केस में सप्लाई नहीं होगा, उसके केस में सप्लाई हो सकता है. सो दैट्स व्हाट आई एम सेइंग, ईच एंड एवरी सर्कमस्टेंसेस में देखना पड़ेगा. You can have your own judgments. You could mention your own points saying that since it is done by a celebrity, it has a popularity value, it will be treated as a supply. ठीक है, लेकिन वो क्या कर रहा है, वो लेके चैरिटी को दे रहा है, फिर टैक्स क्यों भरे? पहले तो पैसे लेगा फिर चैरिटी को देगा. अगर चैरिटी ही बेच रहा है तो बात अलग है, लेकिन शाहरुख खान यहाँ पे अपनी हिसाब से वो बेच रहा है और फिर वो अमाउंट को चैरिटी में दे रहा है, तो वो सप्लाई होके जीएसटी लायबिलिटी आ जाएगा. Of course, there are two views. I'm saying the most conservative view ये रहेगा. Recovery of food expenses from employees. जब employees को हम खाना देते हैं कैंटीन में और उनसे रिकवरी लेते हैं, ओके, स्टिल वो सप्लाई ही रहेगा. ये नहीं बोल सकते कि मैं फूड सप्लाई में नहीं हूं, लेकिन आपके एम्प्लॉयज को आप दे रहे हो जो रेगुलरली काम कर रहे हैं, राइट, और कैंटीन से आप रिकवर, कैंटीन का चार्जेस आप एम्प्लॉय से रिकवर कर रहे हो, उसके ऊपर क्लैरिफिकेशन है कि जीएसटी लगेगा उसके ऊपर. ठीक है, सो एनी रिकवरी ऑफ फ्रॉम द एम्प्लॉयज फॉर फूड इज लायबल टू जीएसटी. तो क्या करते हैं एम्प्लॉयज, कंपनीज जनरली रिकवरी नहीं करते, अगर करते हैं तो उसके ऊपर जीएसटी लगेगी. ठीक है, sir, in case of supply, where supply includes transfer, there is no consideration involved, right? Like FOE example, if I transfer goods from my warehouse to my shop, It is transfer, although it is in the course or furtherance of business, but there is no consideration. So logically, transfer is not supply. No, transfer is also supply. Transfer ke case mein, there is no question of consideration. So transfer and sale mein, that is a difference. When the transfer is happening and there is a consideration, which means what? You're transferring the goods to a third person and he is giving you value, which means a customer. So that is a sale. But transfer without consideration, if you're transferring from your warehouse to shop, okay, that is a leg of transfer. On that also GST may come. When it will come, I'll tell you when we discuss on the topic of registration, wherein on that transfer also GST would be applicable. So transfer from warehouse to a godown from one registered premises. So let's cover this up now only. I have one registered premises, two registered premises in the state of Karnataka. From Bangalore to Mysore, if I'm transferring something for which there is no consideration, but still GST would be leviable, because the GST provision says if you're transferring from one premises to another premises, from one registered entity to another registered entity, then it is a supply. But if you are transferring from one place to another place wherein there is only one registration, then it is not liable to GST. But it is if you're transferring between one entity to another entity or one branch to another branch which are registered under GST, then it is liable to GST. Okay, so a transfer also, that's why it is covered under the definition of supply. Clear, Ramchandra? Free sample for publicity. If you're giving free sample for publicity, it means there is no consideration. On that GST will not apply. But when you come to input tax credit, you'll see कि आप free में तो दे रहे हो, because the flow of GST कैसे होता है कि आप input लेते हो और output करते हो, इसके लिए आपको input मिलता है. लेकिन आप input भी लो और free supply करो तो फिर आपका input benefit भी मिलेगा. So in that case free supply पे आपको GST नहीं भरना है, लेकिन input credit जो है उसको reverse करना पड़ेगा. So you will have to reverse input tax credit in case of a free sample for publicity. जैसे medical companies वगैरह देती है free sample for doctors and for test purposes, right? On that, there will not be any GST on outward supply, but input, whatever is there on those goods, has to be reversed. Companies give food tokens for some consideration, then it is also covered under GST. Yes, even then it is covered under GST. Do you know Telugu? I don't know Telugu, but I know a little bit of Telugu. Great. Okay. So business we understood. Now let's get into Schedule 1. We said no, Schedule 1 is there. What is covered under Schedule 1? Schedule 1 means those transactions in which there is no consideration but still treated as a supply. General supply, what we understood, there should be two things: consideration and in the course of further business. But activities under Schedule 1, even if there is no consideration, still it is liable to GST. Schedule 1, activities without consideration. Permanent transfer or disposal of assets, which means disposal, what all should be there? It should be, there should be, the Schedule 1 just says permanent transfer or disposal of assets. ABC is my explanation. The Schedule 1, will, if you read, it will just say permanent transfer or disposal of assets is covered under Schedule 1, on which GST would be payable, which means disposal or transfer of business assets. It should be transfer of business assets. It should be transfer or disposal must be permanent. Nothing like you give it off and get it back. Temporary transfer or give it on lease or hire, that is not covered. It should be a permanent transfer. And ITC should have been availed on such business assets, which means why will some government levy GST on this activity? They will levy GST on this activity because they've seen that you have claimed the credit, right? The flow always is like that, like how I had told you in case of free samples. When I buy something, credit I've claimed, and then I have to sell it, so credit is available. So if I buy something and if I don't sell, or if I sell it without consideration, or I give it as a free sample, output, there is no GST, right? So chain gets broken. So if you've broken the chain, no GST goes to the government, so reverse the input tax credit, right? That is in case of free sample. Similarly here, when you bought an asset, government gave you the credit. So you've utilized the credit, now you're disposing it off and you're not giving benefit to the government. So when you're transferring, doing a permanent transfer or disposal of business assets, if you had claimed the credit, then you can, only then on your outward supply, GST will be payable, even without consideration. So on this capital goods, if I have not claimed the credit and if I dispose it off, then don't pay GST because the chain is not there, right? Like there is something called as a blocked credit. I said, something called as a block credit. Some assets or some goods what you purchase on this credit will not be available. One of those is motor vehicles, say car. So you bought a car on which GST was not available because you cannot claim credit on a car. Even if you use for business purpose, you cannot claim. Is it so that you said input tax credit is available? Yes, input tax is available on everything except block credit. So when I purchase a car, on this credit is not available. अब जब credit नहीं मिला, अब इसको मैं बेचूं, or if I sell it without consideration, still I don't have to pay GST on the output because the one condition is ITC should have been claimed. If I don't claim the ITC, then I don't have to pay GST on this disposal of the car without consideration. Right? So whatever credit I've claimed and I'm disposing it off, right? Suppose मेरे पास laptops है, मैंने उसके ऊपर credit ले लिया है. Now I'm giving off the old laptops to a NGO. They can at least use it. I'm not taking any consideration from that. On that, I have to pay GST on my outward consideration. Which where there is no consideration, I have to go with the valuation of it. उसका जो notional value है, open market value, on that I have to pay GST. Clear? Second is supply between related persons or distinct person. It should be made in the course of furtherance of business, right? Because schedule and why, what is the emphasis? Emphasis is it should be without consideration, but it should be in the course of furtherance of business. So for all of these points, it should be in the course of furtherance of business. Supply between related persons or distinct persons. You will understand what is a related person and a distinct person so that your question on transfer also will get answered here. Okay, we'll go to the related person and distinct persons, then come back to this slide. Who is a related person? Uncle बोल रहे हैं related persons के लिए 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 phone numbers are there. First is such person are officers or directors of one another's business. Common directors. Okay, common directors or persons who are officers of one another's business. Common partners हो गए, common directors हो गए. One party is related to other party. They will be treated as related persons. Second is such persons are legally recognized partners in business. Okay, legally recognized partners हैं, so they are also treated as related persons. Such persons are employer or employee of the company. So employer and employee are related persons. Any person directly or indirectly owns, controls, or holds 25% or more of the outstanding voting stock or shares of the company. I am holding 25% more in that other company and I'm holding 100% here. So these two companies are related companies. Okay, one person directly or indirectly owns shares of more than 25% shares of these companies. So these two companies becomes related parties. Then these two companies will become related persons. One of them directly or indirectly controls the another. So one person directly through a subsidiary, then another subsidiary controls the third company. Then all these three companies will become related persons. Both of them are directly or indirectly controlled by one person. So I said subsidiary, but if there are two companies and they have common shareholders, then they are also treated as related persons, or together they directly or indirectly control a third person, or they are members of the same family. So much they have covered. So everything is covered wherein I control one person, I am having a partnership firm and having a company, I am controlling a director in the a private limited and a partner in the LLP, then it becomes a related party. So all of this are covered as related persons. And if they are members of the same family, so family members are also covered as related persons, right? So all of this is related persons. Then supply between related or distinct persons. What I mentioned here is basic, you have to understand registration provisions here. Okay. Now we know that registration threshold limit of 20 lakhs, 40 lakhs we have. Now who has to register? Now you have crossed the threshold. Now registration, there are two options which is possible, right? One is within a state, I have multiple branches. I have 10 branches. Should I do registration for all of these branches or no? Is it compulsory to get registered? Let us have an interactive session here. Should we register for all these 10 branches or no? Please answer. In the meantime, I'll take up some more questions. So one question on transferring laptop to NGO for consideration free, for free consideration on which I have got ITC earlier. Now GST will be paid by me from my own pocket. Yes, probably paid from my own pocket, even though I don't receive consideration for donation. Okay, I'm just donating it off. I have to pay GST from my own pocket because you have claimed the credit, no? So you will have to pay GST from your own pocket. Yeah, question on registration. Some people are saying, yes, you have multiple things, so you have to register. Registration is compulsory if you exceed the limit set by the respective act. So each of these branches are crossing 20 lakhs rupees and say the limit is 20 lakhs. So should all these branches register? So if Reliance Group, which is having many subsidiary companies, transaction among them qualifies as transfer, yes, transaction between them qualifies as transfer because they are related persons. Correct. Okay, so most of you have given the correct answer on the registration aspect. So most of you have said no, not required. If we are doing business in different states, we may have multiple registration. Yeah, different states, you have to take multiple registrations. That is clear. My question is, within the state, if you have multiple branches, what do you do? Okay. If it is in the same state, one branch in Mumbai, one branch in Pune, one branch in Thane, Maharashtra, I have various things. I have these three different within the same state. So for all of this, should I take separate registration? Yes, we have to register for multiple branches if they are situated in various states. No, within the same state is my question. If we are doing business in different states, fine, within the same state. Otherwise, if it is within one state only, one can be main business and one registration for head office. Okay. So few of you are confused. Okay, saying that we have to take one registration for head office, one registration for business, one for head office, one for registered office. No. If you are having multiple branches in one state, then you can have an option to take one registration within the state, wherein all the branches can be called as branches. Okay, and one registration is sufficient. So you don't have to take multiple registration, even if you cross 20 lakhs in each of this, even if the limits for the threshold is crossed by each of these branches, it is not mandatory to get registration under separately for each branch. Okay. We can take single registration for all the branches within a state. But if you want to take separate registration, saying that one entity is exempted entity, one entity is taxable entity, one entity is doing only exports, one entity is doing only supplies to SEZ. Each company, each branch is doing separate business vertical, and I want to take separate registration, you can take. You can take one registration for one branch, other two registrations you can commonly take, that is also permitted. Okay, so it's your choice whether you want to take or no. But if you have taken a registration, then any transaction between these two, if you are within a state, if you have multiple registrations, then these entities and these branches are called as distinct persons, which means the establishment of a person with separate registrations, whether within the states or in different states, are considered as distinct persons. Okay, if you take a separate registration, you will be treated as a distinct person. If you don't take separate registration, you are one person itself. You will not be called as distinct persons. When there is a distinct person, okay, that is the first example of distinct person, or where a person is having a registered establishment in a state, you are union territory, and has another establishment in another state. Now, whether that other state is registered or not, if it is in different state, then also they are treated as establishment of distinct persons. Okay. So what is the meaning? Within a state, if I have 10 branches and all the 10 branches are registered under one GST number, one registration I have taken, then any transfer between these 10 branches, stock transfer will not qualify as a supply. Okay. But stock transfer between 10 branches wherein one is registered and other 9 is not registered, any transfer between one that registered entity to any other branch will be treated as a supply. Okay, that's where we said what is supply. It is mentioned here. Supply between related persons or distinct persons. So any transaction between related persons is definitely supply, but supply between distinct person is also supply. Okay, it should be made, of course, in the course of furtherance of business. So any transfer between distinct persons also qualifies as. So generally between distinct persons, you say one branch to another branch. I will not give you consideration. I will set it off later on. Everything fine. So it is covered under Schedule 1. So this will be treated as a transfer and liable for GST. Yes, if we take multiple registration, then each branch is treated as deemed distinct person. Correct. For one state, only one certificate required. Add additional place of business in same certificate. Yeah, that's an option. Either you add or you keep it separately. If a single PAN holder is running 3 different businesses, so he will have to take 3 different GST numbers. It is still optional. If he's having 3 businesses also, if it is there in same state, he can take one registration itself, separate registration not required, but if he wants, he can take separate registration. So in case of separate registration for each branch, we have to pay GST for both branch on supply made. So on one branch, so if I'm doing a transfer from branch A to branch B will not pay. No, branch A will collect from branch B on the invoice, and that branch A will pay to the government. Branch B can claim the credit, right? So it is not like a burden. It's like a benefit. When you transfer it with GST so that you are paying to the government and other branch is claiming the credit. Sir, but construction companies all over India can have only one GST number. Are they exempt? Construction companies all over India cannot have one registration. It's not like a centralized GST registration. We have registration state-wise. So construction companies are there, each state-wise, they will take separate registration and they are not exempt. They are taxable. My question is, if we have a head office and turnover is 15 lakhs and other branch turnover is 10 lakhs, do we require separate registration if threshold limit of that state is 20 lakhs? We will definitely require registration because turnover put together of both the branches is 25 lakhs, so they will have to register. So can we have same GST number for different line of business with single proprietor, sir? Yes, that is possible. For different lines of business also, you can have single registration. Is it up to us to take separate registration for each unit? Yes, it is up to us whether to take separate registration or no. If we can manage with one itself, it's possible. Consolidate the turnover of all the branches and things and claim it at the one place. If you can do it, you can take one registration, no problem. Okay. So supply between related persons or distinct persons, we know that even if it is without consideration, then GST would be payable. Then principal and agent. Only any transaction between supply and agent, principal and agent, here only supply of goods is covered, supply of services is not covered. So only any transfer of good between the principal and agent is liable to GST. Then importation of services. Schedule 1 mein, importation of services, when it is liable, importation of services, we know that if it is not for consideration, if it is for consideration, it's not in the course of further business, it is liable. But here what they're saying, even if it is importation of services without consideration, only in one instance, when it is importation from a related person or establishment located outside India. So only in one instance, it is without consideration, but all other instances, it should be with consideration, but not in the course of furtherance of business. But here, it should be in the course of furtherance of business without consideration when it is importation from a related person or person or establishment who are located outside India, which means if you have a branch outside India, if you have a related person, which means you have a holding company in outside India, and India is a subsidiary, or India is a holding company, outside India you have a subsidiary. Anything, if you are doing any importation from them, they are charging you something, okay, or they are having some common expenses and they're billing you something, that is liable to GST, even if you don't have consideration for that. Okay, not in other cases. Not in other cases means importation of services between non-related persons, that will not be liable for GST if there's no consideration. Here we are talking specifically without consideration only in this instance. Clear? So we'll understand this point 3 and 4 in detail. Point 2, we understood stock transfer between head office and branch office if separate registration or from one state to another state liable to GST. Now, principal agent, supply of goods by a principal to his agent without consideration, where the agent undertakes to supply such goods on behalf of the principal is considered as a supply. Where the agent undertakes to supply the goods on behalf of the principal is liable for supply. Only supply of goods and not supply of services, right? What is the criteria for deciding this is given in this circular 57, because there were a lot of confusions, so the government came up with this circular. Whether the invoice for the supply of goods on behalf of the principal is issued by agent or no, that will be deciding the criteria. Wherein, take this example, invoice for further supply, the principal supply goods to me without consideration. Now, invoice for this supply is being issued by the agent in his name. Okay, wherein the agent is supplying the goods again in his name, then it will fall under this, GST will be applicable. It will fall under para 3, supply will be covering. Take a flip view, then we'll read through again. Invoice is issued by the agent to the customer in the name of principal. Then it will not fall under para 3, not a supply. Okay, so take an example of Rahul Stores is the principal's name. Rahul Stores is supplying to Arun, who is an agent. Now, Rahul Stores, when they supply goods to Arun, this is without consideration because he's an agent. Now, agent supplies the goods in the name of the invoice of Arun Stores itself, or in the name of Rahul Stores itself. Rahul Stores के नाम पे जब वो supply करेगा, he's supplying as if he is a principal itself. So there, this transaction between Rahul Stores and Arun is not a supply. But if Arun supplies in the name of his own name as Arun supplies, Arun Stores, then this too will be treated as a supply between the head principal and the agent. Okay. So if the invoice for the further supply is being issued by the agent in his name, in that case, it will be treated as a supply between the principal and agent. So how is the agent? Is he a pure agent representing the principal? Then there is no supply. If the agent is independent, then it's a supply. Take the other instance, goods procured by the agent on behalf of the principal are invoiced in the name of the agent. Okay, if it is invoiced in the name of agent, then again it gets covered under supply. Clear? Now let's understand something called as a del credar agent. This is also important. Del credar agent means an agent who not only does the agency work, but also guarantees that, okay, I will get the payment from the customer. So I will pay extra commission to him because not only he will find me a customer, he will also promise me that, okay, if the customer defaults, then I will give you the money. तो ठीक है भाई, तो एक्स्ट्रा कमीशन ले ले, लेकिन मेरे को गारंटी तो है कि तेरे से जो मैं सप्लाई करूंगा मुझे फुल पैसे मिल जाएंगे. Whether del credar agent fall under para 3 of the schedule 1, decide based on the discussion in circular 57. Okay, whether he will fall as a normal agent है, तो फिर ये पुराना जो circular that he will decide. But what happens to the whether what kind of agent is there, that will be decided there. क्योंकि अगर del credar agent is there and he is supplying on my behalf, okay, then there is nothing kind of thing that he is supplying on my behalf, no supply. ठीक है, जो मैं customer को sale करूंगा, that will be my consideration. Now, he will whether interest charged by del credar agent for short-term loan is to be included in the value of the supply of the principal. Wherein the del credar agent says that, bhai, I have agreed that I will give your cash to the customer, cash to the supplier, So you take loan from me, but you pay off the money because I don't want to get affected by my commission. So where the interest is charged by the del creditor agent for short-term loan is to be included in the value of supply by the principal when del creditor agent is not an agent under para 3. So he's not an agent, then what happens? Then it need not be included because supply of goods by the principal to the recipient, agency services is by the del creditor agent to the seller or buyer, and loan service is provided by the del creditor agent to the buyer. So loan service is provided by the del creditor agent to the customer. So this should not be included in the value of the supply. Generally, if I'm supplying to anybody and I'm saying I'll charge you interest, that has to be included in my supply. But in case of a del creditor agent, I don't have to include it because del creditor agent is providing this loan service in his individual capacity, not in behalf of the principal. Okay. Then when del creditor agent is an agent under para 3 and makes payment on behalf of the buyer and charges interest to the buyer, will supply value has to be increased? Yes, in this case, because supply of goods is by the principal to the del creditor agent, okay, and the supply of goods by del creditor agent to the buyer. Now I am supplying to the del creditor agent. He is not an agent falling under para 3. Okay, is an agent but and makes payment on behalf of the buyer. He agrees that I will pay you. Who is the customer? You don't ask me. Okay, so supply of goods by the del creditor agent to the buyer, agency service by del creditor agent to the seller or buyer, and loan service is by the del creditor agent to the buyer. So he is acting as completely a principal instead of an agent. He is agreeing that I will pay you, not the customer. When he is agreeing to pay me, okay, on behalf of the buyer, I am trusting him. So then this will be treated as a the value has to be included. So it means whatever interest I charge for extra thing has to be included in my supply. Little confusing, but let me clear this again. When the del creditor agent, first you have to determine whether it is an agent or no. When the supply is happening on my invoice itself, then there is no supply between me and him. Only on his commission I will pay GST. But when this agent is supplying in his own invoice, right, then whatever I give him free of charge also is treated as a supply. Correct? Because he is acting as an independent person. Second is once you have decided that yes, he's an agent and this transaction between me and this agent is liable to supply, then the second question comes is what happens to the interest, whatever is being charged for late payment? Will this be included in the value? If the del creditor agent is acting, okay, in between, then nothing is to be added. But if I am supplying to the del creditor agent, then it has to be added if I am supplying to the del creditor agent and del creditor agent is finding somebody else. Okay. What is if a person is carrying business of selling goods and also providing services? What is the threshold limit? Like a painter is painter, he's only providing services, then it will be the service limit. But if he's providing goods, then goods limit. If it is both, then what we'll have to see what is the principal supply. Like a painter, you engage a painter to buy the paint, not to buy the paint, because he will source it from somebody and give it to you. So his primary thing is supply of painting services. So the limit of services will apply to it. What is the benefit of GST registration? If you register under GST, your sales, you have a right to collect from your customers and you can claim the input tax credit. Otherwise, input tax credit आपको नहीं मिलेगा. What is the scope of aggregate turnover? Aggregate turnover scope is everything, or total turnover is part of aggregate turnover. Example, if Tata India imports service from Tata Holding outside India, then GST is applicable? Yes, GST is applicable in that case. Can we say that if invoice is issued in the name of agent, it's a supply? Correct. If invoice is issued in the name of agent, then my transaction between me and agent is supply. Correctly understood now. Difference between agent and del creditor agent. Agent is a person who will find your customer. That's the agent's work. Del creditor agent will find you a customer and also tell that payment is secured. If he doesn't pay, you charge me interest, I will pay. Or sometimes he may tell that you charge interest to the customer directly also. So That is the extra benefit we get from a del credar agent. Can credit card company be stated as an example of del credar agent? Not exactly, because they're into this activity of providing the credit services. So credit card company cannot be called as a del credar agent. Clear, Bharat, on del credar agent, what I've said you? Good. Important part on importation of services. This chart, you will not get it anywhere. I have seen the various scenarios and explained this. Remember this. Import of services without consideration by a person from a related person or from his establishment in the course of further business is included. But so there are various permutations and combinations. Importation of services where there is a consideration is present. And if it is in the course of further business, taxable. Clear? Because first leg itself says when there is consideration and it is in the course of further business, it is taxable. Second, when there is consideration is present, but it is not in the course of business, then what we said 7(1)(b, still it is taxable. Correct? Third case, when there is no consideration, but it is in the course of furtherance of business, is it taxable? Yes, it is taxable only if it is from a related person, if a related or establishment located outside India. If it is importation from a related persons, only then it is taxable. Right? Not in all of the cases. All other cases, it is exempted only. It will not be liable because consideration is also not present, and it is from a related. It is not from a related person, even though it is in the course of further business. Since consideration is not present, not liable to GST. But if you do importation of services from a related person, then it is liable to GST, where consideration is not present. We're talking about this. In last scenario, where consideration is also not present and not in the course of further business, then it is not taxable. Okay, so importation of services from a relative, where I'm not paying anything and he's not in the course of further business, I'm not in the course of, I have to look at from my perspective, because this is from the perspective of recipient. I'm not in the business of by getting something from him. He's sending it personally. Okay, he's providing some services personally, then not taxable. Okay, so when is it taxable? Only in basically two scenarios. First scenario where no, it is always taxable. Second scenario, consideration is present, not in the course of further business. 7(1)(b) says it is taxable. And consideration not present cases, it will be taxable only when you are a related person. Clear? Gayatri, your question is marketing particular brand goods by distributor to retail is called agency or del credar agency? It's called agency, not a del credar. Can I explain difference between point 2 and 4? Point 2 is consideration. Your consideration is present. Point 4, consideration is not present. Makes a lot of difference. If consideration is present, then it's taxable. If consideration is not present, then not taxable. Okay. Now get into supplies without consideration. Schedule 1. When even if no consideration, it will be considered as supply. Like sales promotion scheme, what happens? Whether they all are not liable to GST, because on my sales promotion, I make sale without consideration. So then there again a clarification. Why I'm emphasizing on these clarifications is there could be a questions coming up from these clarifications, because generally what we understood, and if it is clarified by the department, it means there is some issue, right? That's why they made a clarification. So there could be a practical case study which could be given up, saying that this was the scenario, will there be liable for GST or no? Okay. Free samples. Free samples do not qualify as supply, because on my supply, I'm not getting any consideration, so no GST. But if it is input has been claimed, then I have to reverse the input. Second is buy one, get one schemes. Wherein I give, like say, buy, generally in pharma industry, say you buy one box of full tablets, I will give you one more box free. So buy one, get one offers generally done there. In that case, what happens? Will it be treated as on one box you have a consideration, other box no consideration? No. What GST authorities have said is, when you give buy one, get one free, you have considered the pricing of the free product also in the first product itself. So it will be treated as a composite supply, wherein both the products price will be treated as one, and you don't have to reverse the credit. So only in certain specific schemes like buy one, get one scheme, buy two, get one scheme, whatever is there, on that, if you're not charging GST on the free supply, you don't have to reverse it. It will be treated as though the price of the free product is covered in the first product. So no GST reversal required. Yeah. Section 7(1)(a), which is a classification, it says that GST is the only tax, but for goods and services, separate tax. Like the rate on job work of a product of service is 18%, but the rate on that product is less. So that's why you have to do a classification correctly, because some classification on services is dependent on the goods also. So whether it's goods or services is important. That's why this Schedule 2 is there. Now, restaurants used to charge VAT and service tax under earlier regime. That's why they've got it under Schedule 2 now, saying that restaurant services is liable for GST on rate of services. So Schedule 2 not covered in your syllabus, but just a general understanding saying that Schedule 2 is for classification between goods and services. Now, taxability of tenancy rights. There is again a clarification here. They've said that what is tenancy rights? Generally, when I am a landowner, I get various rights. I have a right of possessing, which means I can go and stay on the line. I have a right of control. Without staying also, I can control it. I have a right of exclusion, saying that whether what should I construct or not, or something should be left out. I have a right of that. A right to derive income. If I don't possess it, I can give it to somebody else and they can give me a rent, a right to derive any income from that. A right of, again, I'm using rent, of course, license, lease. I have a right to derive income through a lease. And right of disposition, I have a right to sell it off also. So there are various rights under a ownership, under land ownership. There's nothing that only possession is a right. Possession, control, exclusion, deriving income, and disposition. These are the various rights I have. Right. What happens in case of a pagdi system? Pagdi means one-time payment for getting this right. Okay. So pagdi, or it could be called as a goodwill. Okay, wherein I am a tenant. If I am a tenant, I can tell that I am a right of possession of this property. Now, if I have to own this, I can either give this one right of possession right to somebody and other rights I can control. Right? This generally happens in North India, wherein I don't want to get into the property menace. I say, okay, I'll give you a right of possession. You take this right of possession, you give it to anybody, but you can't sell it. You can only rent it off to somebody else, but I will hold the other rights. The activity of transfer of tenancy right against consideration is a supply of service in GST. Right? However, grant of tenancy right in residential dwelling is exempted. But so we should know under GST, any rents what we collect for commercial businesses is liable to GST, but collection of rent for the residential purposes is exempted. Okay. But if I give this, so any rent which I collect for residential purposes is exempt from GST. But if I collect surrendering this tenancy right, saying that I don't want this monthly rental, you take this benefit of collecting rental, you give me for one amount. This one amount what he gives even for residential thing is liable to GST. So that one time what he gives is called as pagdi. Pagdi means one time amount for the collection of rent. Instead of me collecting rent, I will appoint one person. He will collect the rents. He will let it off. All of this he will do. But he cannot lease. He cannot take loan against this property, or he cannot sell off this property. The property still belongs to me. But one right of collection of rent belongs to him. How much he collects, more or less, I will not bother. One time amount you give me. This is called as pagdi. This amount is liable to GST. Even if it is residential thing, it is liable to GST is what the clarification is about. Okay. Now, non-supplies under GST, which means Schedule 3 is one example of non-supplies. Then there are other places also where non-supplies are there. So non-supplies are of three kinds. One is Schedule 3, or it could be by way of a notification, or it could be by way of a clarification. Right? Schedule 3, what all it gets covered, employee and employee relationship is excluded and it is not covered under Schedule 3. Activities of a court or tribunal. Court does so much things, right? Those activities are not liable to GST. Functions performed by MP, MLA is not liable to GST. Funeral, burial, or crematorium outside. Sale of land. Sale of land is also outside GST, subject to Schedule 2. In Schedule 2, if you see, Schedule 3 says construction activities and construction of building services. So construction services, building services is liable to GST, but sale of land is not liable to GST. Okay, so sale of land on land is an immovable property, so GST cannot be levied on that. Sale of land is outside GST, but construction of building is liable to GST because construction services involve, lot of other activities are involved, right? So that's why sale of building, construction of building, GST is liable, but on land, GST is not liable. Actionable claims. I had said you this. Actionable claims is there under Schedule 2, which means actionable claims is excluded from GST other than lottery, betting, and gambling. Means lottery, betting, and gambling are actionable claims on which GST is there. On all other actionable claims, GST is not leviable. So that is Schedule 3. Now, what are the non-supplies under notifications? They have said that panchayat and municipality functions, any activities done by the government or authorities as a municipality function or a panchayat services. So municipality does lot of, we have we like in Bangalore, we have Bengaluru Mahanagara Palike, which does the municipality services of upkeep of the roads, cleaning the garbages and other things. That services and panchayat, if it also does panchayat services by small villages, those services are not liable to GST. They are under exempted through a notification. Also, alcoholic liquor license. So, alcoholic liquor, alcohol is outside GST. Alcoholic liquor licenses. Alcoholic is outside GST. Alcoholic liquor license has been sold. That one-time amount what the government collects, that is also exempted from GST. Then there's a clarification which says that interstate movement of conveyance between distinct persons. We said any transfer between distinct persons is liable to GST, right? But interstate movement of conveyance, like lorries, trucks between one place to another place, if you use, okay, because you're using it only for your business purposes. If it is between distinct purpose, that is also treated as non-supplies. And interstate movements of rigs, tools, spares, and goods on wheels are also treated as non-supplies. Rigs, tools, and spares. So basically, all the spare parts which is used and spares and goods on wheels, okay, are exempted from GST because they are all generally used for repair purposes. That's the reason they've said it is outside GST. Okay. Any questions till here before we go to composite and mixed supply? Pagdi means lump sum amount, correct? Stock and trade used for personal use, do we have to reverse credit also? Yes, stock and trade used for personal use, if you do, we have to reverse credit. That is covered under your input tax credit. You will get more details of it. If I am an employee who owns a land and rents it for commercial business, will I get ITC, sir, if it GST applies? Yeah, if you're an employee and if you have a land on which you're collecting commercial business, yes, you will get GST credit only to the basis of business. So it can't be that any other personal expenses what you're incurring, you can claim credit of that. No. GST input credit, which is used for the purpose of business, only that you can claim. So if you're an employee and you have a commercial business, you're rating it off on that, you're collecting GST. Any services in relation to that commercial business, in respect to that building, expenses incurred, you can claim credit for that. In case of employer-employee, suppose if employer is in business of selling goods or services covered under GST and the employer supplies same product to his employee, then also is it not covered under GST? All, see, employer-employee service we said excluded. So employer-employee means what? Employee doing services of an employer. Now, if employer is selling goods to him, he is not doing that as an employee, right? He is buying it as a normal person, then normal GST will apply. Employer-employee, when we say the term itself means the relationship is of a principal and agent. What the employer says he has to do. Anything else, transactions are there, that will be liable for GST. Distinct person means, we have explained that what's a distinct person, means a person who has the same registration, but within the same state having different registrations, or a person registered in one place and having establishments outside the state are treated as, are called as distinct persons. Can you please elaborate the last point in clarification section? Last point in clarification section. That Pagdi, what we had discussed, no? Saying that if I get one-time settlement for giving away my right of collection of rent, that one-time settlement, generally it is exempted if I have got monthly rental for residential purposes. But if I give it one-time activity of giving away this collection of rent business, then that thing is, that collection of one-time amount is called as Pagdi, and that is liable to GST. Okay. Okay. Interstate movement of rigs also. So any interstate movement of rigs, tools, spares, and goods on wheels is also liable, is treated as non-supply under GST. Now, composite and mixed supply. So we understood supply. Now, what is the meaning of composite supply? Simple. See, when I do any transaction, I don't do one thing. I could involve in two or more things. So what is the taxability of that is being clarified, is specifically mentioned under Section 8. Section 8 defines what is the taxability of composite supply and mixed supply. And definition of composite supply is given under Section 2, subsection 30, which says composite supply means a supply which is made by a taxable person to a recipient and comprises of two or more taxable supply of goods or services or any combination thereof. So composite supply means a supply which is made by a taxable person to a recipient, fine, and comprises of two or more taxable supplies of goods or services. So there should be two or more supplies involved, which means and are naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business. When I make two or more supplies, generally, suppose I'm selling laptop and I'm selling printer, fine. So these two are separate supplies. If you're buying together, is it a composite supply? No. You're buying together as two supplies, but you're buying at one day or one place itself. So these are two supplies, no problem. But if you're buying a laptop and I say, okay, how will you use the laptop? I will give you a mouse along with it. Still, it is two supplies because individually I can sell them. But if I say in the laptop, I will install some software and give you. Then what happens? They are two supplies which comprise of two or more taxable supplies of goods or services. One is good, one is services, or any combination is fine. And they should be naturally bundled, which means I am supplying laptop and I am naturally bundling the operating system. So I'm saying, okay, along with this, I'll give you operating system also, which otherwise is available separately, but they're generally naturally bundled, saying that when I buy a laptop, I have to use it. So I'll install the operating system and give you. They're naturally bundled and supplied in conjunction with each other in the ordinary course of business. So I tell, generally, I'm supplying laptop along with the software. So they are treated as a composite supply. Okay. And one of it should be a principal supply. What is the principal supply? Laptop. You came to buy laptop, not to buy software. You came to buy a laptop and you bought the laptop. So it is an example of a composite supply. When two or more supplies are bundled together and supplied in conjunction with each another in the ordinary course of business is an example of composite supply. Okay. And one of which is a principal supply. This is an example of composite supply. So what happens to the rate? The rate will be if the laptop is supplied at 18% and they say example software is at 5%, then the rate on the laptop will be the rate applied on the software also. So it's a composite supply. The rate of the principal supply will be applied for the other supplies. Okay. So a rate of 18% if it is for the laptop, that 18% rate I have to apply on the additional supplies also, on the second supply also, if it is bundled together. We'll see some examples. What are the points to consider? What is the perception of the consumer? So if I buy a mobile, mobile rate, and generally mobile comes with a charger. So if my perception is if I buy mobile, it'll come with a charger. So it will be treated as a composite supply. If the charger has a lower rate or if the charger has a higher rate, still say mobile rate is 18%, charger rate is 28%. So I cannot bifurcate the value. I am supplying your mobile for 10,000 rupees. Now I cannot bifurcate the value. So 10,000 plus 18% will apply, not 10,000 plus 28%, because it's a composite supply and the principal supply is of mobile. Since the principal supply is of mobile, I will charge you 18% because that's the rate for the mobile supply. How service providers in that business provide similar bundle of services like air travel. So these are the criteria to decide whether it's a principal supply or a mixed supply. So how the service providers conceive. So when they provide services, they provide air travel along with other facilities like food and things like that. And that's how air travel is bundled. So that also is a composite supply. Nature of various services in a bundle supply, like stay in a hotel. If I stay in a hotel, breakfast is complimentary. So that is a bundle supply. So it will be treated as a composite supply. Normally advertised as a package. So stay in a hotel when you stay in a hotel, then shampoos is given free for you, or any other services is included. Food is also included. So it will be treated as a composite supply. Different events are not separately available. Example, when a water purify services, the water purify AMC, when I take, he comes for services. Now he provides the parts also. I cannot tell that I'll buy the parts like Eureka Forbes. This company has unique products which I cannot get it from outside. So the service engineer itself gets me the products. So for me, what is the principal supply? Is it a composite supply? Yes, there are two supplies involved. They are naturally bundled generally, right? Because when I do a servicing, generally parts also you'll buy. Then what is the principal supply? Is it the parts or the service? I'm looking for his service. So that's the principal supply. So if that is the principal supply, then the rate for that principal supply will apply on the parts also. Okay. The different elements are an integral part to one overall supply, which means when I buy a laptop, operating system has to be there, otherwise I cannot operate it. So it's an integral to one overall supply. That's why that's also treated as an example of composite supply. Okay. Others, before we get into this example, we'll understand what is a mixed supply. Mixed supply means two or more individual supply of goods or services or any combination thereof made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person. Means same thing, two or more supplies is there. It's made in a combination for a single price where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. Which does not constitute a composite supply is treated as a mixed supply, which the transaction consists of supplies not naturally bundled in the ordinary course. In the composite supply, there were two supply. In mixed supply, also there are two supply. But in a composite supply, what happened? Those two bundling packaging was a natural packaging, which means they were naturally bundled. But in mixed supply, it is not naturally bundled; it's artificially bundled. Like some famous example of I buy a shampoo, a toothpaste, and a shaving cream. I can buy individually. Are they naturally bundled? No. But the supplier is making a gift hamper of it and selling it, saying that buy three for a special price. So it's a mixed supply. Mixed supply, what is the GST rate? In composite supply, we saw that what is the rate of principal supply. But in mixed supply, it is not a composite supply. It means there is no principal supply. So whatever is the rate of the highest rate in this hamper will apply. If there are three products, one is at 5, one is at 12, one is at 18, 18% will be the rate applicable in all of these three products. Okay, that's how the mixed supply is distinguished. So mixed supply is dangerous, the rate is higher. Composite supply, the rate of principal supply will apply. Now there are some clarifications that's given. It says that in case of printing of books, what happens? In case of printing of books, pamphlets, etc., where only the content is supplied by the publisher or owner. When the publisher or owner supplies the content, then it's the owner, where the only content is supplied by the publisher or owner of publishing, right? Then supply of printing is the principal supply. Okay, principal. There's a supply of service, which means when I'm giving my content to him and he's giving me books, he's giving me books which are goods, but is it supply of goods or services? The clarification is when I'm giving a content, he's printing it and giving it to me. That's a supply of service, not printing of books, because I can buy plain papers anywhere, but the printer will print it on the papers and give it to me and make it a book. So it's a supply of service. The primary activity is supply of service. So it's a composite supply and not a mixed supply, because there are not two things. He's naturally bundling the supply of service and printing, and the main activity is supply of service. Next, printed envelopes, letter cards, napkins using logo design of the recipient. So I'm saying, okay, only use my logo, but I'm buying napkins or printed envelopes. So only logo I'm giving. There's nothing like a special thing like content I'm giving. So it's just printing. Mobile phone, it comes with case, charger, earphones, and extra earbuds. Yes. But what are we buying? We are buying mobile. So it's the composite supply. Is there a maximum limit on goods or services in composite supply? No, no maximum limit. It could be any number of goods, any number of services. Good. Buying laptop with ultra-wires can be treated as composite supply. Yes, it could be treated as a composite supply. Mix. these slides will get updated, because MCQs, generally if I give you the slides before, then MCQ answers will be known to you. That's the reason after my classes, I'll provide the MCQ highlighted ones and will give you. For my last class, I have already shared. If you have not got, do let me know. I will inform the IT team to upload it. Repeat the last slide, this one. So what is supply of service? What is supply of goods? Basically, in case of printing of books, the publisher, the main publisher or the content writer will give the books to the printing agency. So is it supply of goods or services? It is supply of service. In case of envelopes, if I'm giving envelopes to the, if I'm buying envelopes from somebody, I'm telling him to print it. So he's only printing it. There I cannot tell I'm giving it main content, so it's supply of services. No, it is still supply of goods. Okay. Third example, bus bodybuilding, wherein I give chassis and that person will put the chassis on it. It's called as bus bodybuilding. So if I provide the fabric, all the metal pieces to him, he only does the fabrical installation, properly fitting up the components on the chassis. It's a supply of service. But if he's providing the metal also, he's providing the content also along with the supply of thing, then it's a supply of goods. On the chassis, if he's providing he's only taking the metal content, molding it and putting it on the bus, on the chassis, then it's supply of goods. Retreading of tires means old tires I want to make it new. I'll give it to a person who will do all the finishing work and give it to me. So it is a supply of service. But if I'm buying the tires also from him, then it's supply of goods. That's what the clarification says. Okay. I'll not wait for your answers because we have very shortage of time. I'll tell the questions. You just think of the answers and we'll go through the answers. Is the network issue resolved now? Everybody is able to see the slides. So first question, what is the answer? Okay. Mr. A imported interior design services from company X for a payment of $50,000 for his house construction in Hyderabad. Is the service treated as a supply or no? Yeah, first question, at least I'll wait for your answers. Okay. Most of you are saying yes, because it is very much explained here. Yes, because answer is B, because import of service is treated as supply even if it is not received in the course or furtherance of business. Correct. Question number 2. Lajawab India Limited sells a package of goods for a single price, which consists of face cream, body lotion, hair oil, and perfume. These products can be sold individually. We know this. What type of supply is it and what GST? Very simple. It is a mixed supply, right? And you will get the highest rate. So the correct answer is D. Okay. Goods means every kind of movable property other than money and securities, but includes, that's the definition. Here, what does the money used in the definition of goods does not include? What does money does not include? Does money include Indian legal tender? Yes, it includes Indian legal tender. It includes money order. Does it include currency that is held for its numismatic value? Here, definition of money was not discussed, but definition of money means whatever is Indian legal tender, money order, or foreign currencies. But if, or a traveler's check, all of this is included in the definition of money. But it does not include money which is held for its numismatic value. Means if I hold a 20 rupees, 20 paise coin because it has a good relevance for it. And if I sell it, can I say that it is sale of money, so no GST? No, because you have held that 20 paise coin and you've got 20 rupees because it has a numismatic value. So it is excluded from the definition of money and GST will be liable on that. Okay, so money which is held, currency which is held for its numismatic value is not included under the definition of money. Okay. Mr. X imported professional services in the course of furtherance of business from his son without consideration who is staying in New York. Is this treated as supply or no? The correct answer is yes, because it is treated as a deemed supply even if there is no consideration. Okay, even if there is no consideration, it is still treated as a supply because it is from a, first of all, because it is from a related person, not for any other reason. Even since it is from a related person, it is treated as a supply. What is numismatic means the value. Coin, we are not holding it for the value. Like 1 rupee coin, if I exchange it for 1 rupee, 250 paisas, then it is for 1 rupee coin, has a currency value. But if it is having 1 rupee coin has some uniqueness in it, wherein it has some unique features, then it is called as numismatic value. Okay, so which is having some value because of its presence. The exact definition of numismatic means relating to or consideration of coins. So some value of coins, whatever it is there, for that what we have hold it, that is called as numismatic value. A little tricky question. Which of the following activities are not treated as supply if it is made without consideration? Generally, supply of goods between principal and agent without consideration is covered under Schedule 1. Supply of services between principal and agent with consideration need not get covered anywhere because there is with consideration. Supply of services between principal and agent is not treated because supply of services is not there under Schedule 1. What is there under Schedule 1 is only supply of goods. So only A is there under Schedule 1, which means it is not it is treated as supply. And supply of services, this is also treated as supply. So only B is not treated as a supply. So correct answer for by 5 is B. Currency having celebrity signature is currency with numismatic value. Yes, even then it is currency with numismatic value. So answer for question number 5 is B, because the question is given in a negative manner. From which of the following activities are not treated as a supply if it is made? Basically, you have to say that if it is made without consideration. So, which of the following activities are not treated as supply? This is considered as supply, and C is also considered as supply. So, B is considered as a non-supply. Great. Mr. A is a publisher who has asked Mr. B, who is a proprietor of printing press, to print his script as books. Mr. B accepted his proposal and printed the books. While printing, Mr. B used his own papers to print the script. Is this transaction treated as supply of goods or supply of services? We have seen that clarification, no? So when a publisher gives the books, gives his content to a printing agency, and he gives the books, it is still treated as supply of service. So our correct answer is D. Even though paper is used for printing, supply of printing is the principal supply, therefore treated as supply of services. Okay. Question number 7. Servicing of cars includes both supply of goods and supply of services. At what rate the goods and services are liable to tax? Now this, you might get separate answers, but there's a clarification. They've said, they're saying that if there is supply of goods and supply of services and the invoice you have separate bills raised, separate invoices, separate amounts mentioned for goods and services, then the circular says that respective rates will apply for goods and services. The correct answer is B. I had my view is different, but the circular says that respective rates will apply on goods and services. So we have to apply the respective rates. Okay. Mr. B sent goods to Mr. A, who is a job worker, for packaging the goods in corrugated boxes. It is treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Okay. So job working activity is supply of goods or services. Job working activity is treated as supply of service itself. Okay. So job working activity is treated as supply of service, not goods, because he is sending goods to only package the package and gives it back to me. Okay. So that's treated as supply of services. Ms. Deepa is applying for bank exam. She's supposed to pay application fees through demand draft. She went to the bank and made application to convert money into demand draft. Bank charges the service fees for converting money into demand draft. Is this transaction amounting to supply? Yeah. This answer you give, then other answers you don't answer, because I will just upload that. This is a relevant answer. Relevant thing to answer for you. No, because money is not included in the definition of goods. Yes, because consideration charged for conversion of money from one form to another form is a service, therefore a supply of service. Yes, since money in any form is liable to supply, no banking services are exempt from GST. Very, very confusing answers over here. Few people are saying D and B. So there's a lot of confusion between D and B. Is this transaction amounting to supply? No, banking services are exempt. No, banking services are not exempt. Banking services are liable to GST. Only interest, I said, was exempted. So it is not D. The correct answer is B, because consideration charge for conversion of money from one form to another form is a service. Use of money is excluded, but conversion is liable to charge as a service. So it is treated as a supply of service. Under what circumstances donation is not chargeable to GST? Donation made for commercial purpose with quid pro quo is liable to GST. Donation made for advertisement is liable to GST. Donation made for philanthropic purpose, which means it's a genuine purpose, then it is not liable to GST. So answer is C. Permanent transfer of disposal of business assets for without consideration is treated as supply if this transfer should be permanent. That is one condition. ITC is not availed. Okay. And our ITC is availed. What is this? Both A and C. So A and C should be met, which is transfer should be made with should be permanent, and ITC should be availed. Only if these two conditions are satisfied, then it will be treated as supply. So correct answer is D. United Breweries brought an asset on 1st January 2015 and has now made a permanent transfer of that asset without consideration. Is it treated as supply or no? People who are there, this also you can answer. This is a little tricky question. Meaning of block credit. Block credit means those credits which are restricted are called as block credits, right? Means credits which are not permitted are called as block credits. So even if you use for business purposes, you'll not get it Surbi. So those are called as block credits. So input tax credit, when we read, section 17 gives you a list of block credits. If for your understanding, you can go through section 17, wherein they've said what is block credits. Those credits, even if you genuinely use for business purposes, you don't get the credit of that. Question number 12. Question number 12. What is the answer? 12 answer is D. Somebody is saying, most of them are saying B. Since it's a sale of asset, you get the credit and you have claimed the credit, and it's a permanent transfer or disposal of assets. So it is treated as supply because of Schedule 1. What basis people are saying D? Maybe one person has said D. Others, everybody has said A and B. Akash Neil, your answer is correct. Ramchandra, your answer is correct. B, yes, since ITC is claimed and sold without consideration falls under Schedule 1. Okay. One important thing you need to note as is, it has been mentioned ITC has been claimed, but where in the question do you find that ITC has been claimed? Few things are not mentioned in the question, but few things we need to understand. When did GST come into picture? GST started only on 1st of July 2017. But this person has brought the asset on 1st January 2015. So could he have claimed credit before GST came in? He could not have claimed. And there's no mention whether he's claimed credit or no. So we cannot assume that he's claimed credit. We have to say that he bought the asset before the GST came in, so he didn't claim the credit. So since ITC was not claimed, because ITC was not claimable at that time and there is no consideration, so it is not a supply. Okay, so only if he claims the credit, he can then it is liable for supply. But in this case, he has not claimed the credit, so in this case, he cannot. It is not treated as a supply because he's not claimed the credit. Clear? So answer for 12 is D. Mr. Bharat, your question is on question number 7. Question number 7, servicing of cars. So servicing of cars and supply of services. So you provide goods also, you provide service also. So on what rate should it be applicable? The circular says that when in the invoice, and they're mentioned separately indicated in the invoice, if that separately indicated invoice, what is the GST rate for spare parts? Say 5% they will apply. Supply of service for labor 18% that they will apply. So that is the answer wherein respective rates will apply on goods and services, which means like my example on buying a computer and printer from the same shop at same time, right? So like that itself, when there are separately indicating what is the spare parts and what is the service charges, separate mentioning, so separate rates will apply. It is neither a composite supply nor a mixed supply. Okay. Clear? 13 is very simple. X has obtained 2 registrations in the state of Karnataka. One is establishment A and one is establishment B. Any transfer made between A and B is treated as a supply or no? Yes, we know it's treated as supply because establishment A and B are treated as distinct persons. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any doubts, please let me know. I have 2 more minutes. So we'll meet back on 29th, wherein we'll discuss on charge of GST. Okay, if there are no more questions, then we can close the session. Any questions you could ask me in the next session. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.